Chapter 1. It was the 3rd month of spring when the grass was long and the flowers were blooming. On the peak of Tienga Mountain, a young man and a young woman were standing side by side under an ancient pine tree, intimately snuggling together as they looked at the distant mountains and scenery. The young man was about 16 or 17 years old with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His face was handsome and his figure was tall and straight. He wore a long brocade robe, and his every movement had a heroic and noble aura. It was obvious that he was born in a wealthy family. The young woman in a white dress snuggled up to him. Although she was only 15 or 16 years old, she already had a graceful figure and a beautiful face. She also had a fresh and elegant temperament. The young woman slightly tilted her head and looked at the young man. Her charming face revealed a faint smile as she said in a clear and sweet voice, "Big Brother Tianqing, there are still 3 days until the Sky Pillar sect comes to our Imperial Azure Kingdom to recruit disciples. At that time, all the young talents in the kingdom will gather in the Imperial City to participate in the Sky Pillar sect's entrance examination. Big Brother Tianqing, your goal has always been to enter the Sky Pillar sect. How are your preparations going?" Ji Tianqing held the young woman's small hand and revealed a confident smile. "Little sister Yunfei, the Sky Pillar sect is the #1 sect in our Tianqin region and controls 10 kingdoms in the Tianqin region. They only recruit 10 disciples from our Imperial Azure Kingdom every 3 years. Wanting to enter the Sky Pillar sect as a disciple is as difficult as ascending to heaven. However, with my current strength and talent, it shouldn't be a problem to enter the Sky Pillar sect." Hearing this, Ling Yunfei glared at him and said with a smile, "Big Brother Tianqing, you're too modest. You're the young master of the Ji family, one of the 4 great families in the Imperial City and the #1 genius of the younger generation in the Imperial City. 3 years ago, when you were still at the 9th level of the body refinement realm, you were already a top martial genius in the Imperial City. Ever since I gave you our Ling family's heirloom, the God Pearl, your Xian Jian bloodline was completely awakened. You only used 3 short years to go from the 9th level of the body refinement realm to the 7th level of the true element realm. With your cultivation speed, not to mention being the #1 in the Imperial City, you can even be called the #1 genius in the entire Imperial Azure Kingdom. Big Brother Tianqing, not only will you be able to pass the test easily, you'll even be able to secure 1st place and become a core disciple of the Sky-bearing sect." Being flattered by Ling Yunfei, Ji Tianqing was not arrogant at all. His face was still calm. He rubbed Ling Yunfei's head and smiled. "Little sister Yunfei, you are also very outstanding. Not only is she the daughter of the Ling family, one of the 4 great families, but she is also the most talented alchemist of the younger generation. With your strength at the 5th level of the true energy realm, you are not much weaker than me. 3 days later, you'll definitely be able to pass the test and enter the Sky Pillar sect with me. We've already been engaged for 3 years. After we successfully enter the Sky-bearing sect, I'll have my father send betrothal gifts to the Ling family and marry you as soon as possible." "Aya, Tianqing Gij, don't say anymore, it's so embarrassing." Hearing this, Ling Yunfei blushed and lowered her head shyly on Ji Tianqing's shoulder. Ji Tianqing smiled and stretched out his arms to embrace her. He said in a gentle voice, "Yunfei, if I didn't meet you, I wouldn't be who I am today. My title as the #1 genius in the Imperial City is half due to you. Yunfei, when we enter the Sky Pillar sect together in the future and get married, we can be together forever. We can also cultivate together and pursue the peak of martial arts." Ji Tianqing was full of anticipation as he spoke, but he didn't see that Ling Yunfei, who was nestled in his arms, had a cold, disdainful look in her eyes. Ling Yunfei's right hand seemed to unintentionally press on his lower abdomen. Suddenly, a tyrannical origin power burst out, and a ball of crimson fire burst out from her palm. Bang! With a muffled sound, Ji Tianqing, who was caught off guard, was sent flying more than 3 meters away by Ling Yunfei's full-strength palm. He fell under the ancient pine tree with a pale face. Ji Tianqing struggled to get up and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked at Ling Yunfei in disbelief and shouted, "Yunfei, why did you do this to me?" He couldn't believe that Ling Yunfei, who had been in love with him for 3 years, would sneak attack him. At this moment, Ling Yunfei seemed to have changed into a different person. The fresh and elegant temperament on her body had disappeared. Her whole body was emitting a chill. She stared at Ji Tianqing with contempt and walked towards him step by step. Ji Tianqing, do you think that with the wealth and power of your Ji family, you can move my heart? Do you think that with the you from 3 years ago, you can make me have a good impression of you when we first met? Hee, Ji Tianqing, you are too naive. Ling Yunfei's tone was full of disdain and ridicule. Her beautiful face was also filled with a cold smile. Ji Tianqing leaned against the ancient pine tree with a pale face and looked at her in disbelief. He suddenly realized that this fiancé, who had always been gentle and elegant in front of him, had become so unfamiliar. Ling Yunfei walked in front of him and looked at him with pity. She sneered, Ji Tianqing, to tell you the truth, the reason why I have been in love with you for the past 3 years, often giving you elixirs and sparing no effort to help you cultivate, is because of that god pearl. The real name of the god pearl in your body is the god-seizing pearl. I have placed it in your dantian so that it can absorb your cultivation and bloodline talent. The higher the level, the stronger the bloodline talent, the stronger the effect of nurturing the god-seizing pearl. Ji Tianqing's face suddenly changed, revealing a face full of shock and anger. He shouted, Ling Yunfei, you actually used me to steal my cultivation and talent with the god-seizing pearl? You are so vicious. Under the attack of anger, Ji Tianqing's dantian was in pain and blood foam came out of his mouth. He subconsciously used his elemental energy, trying to suppress the injury in his dantian. But he suddenly realized that his dantian seemed to be sealed by some kind of power, and he couldn't use any elemental energy. In a moment of desperation, he struggled to escape, but found that his whole body was numb, and he couldn't move at all. Seeing him like this, Ling Yunfei revealed a thick, sarcastic expression and sneered, Ji Tianqing, stop struggling and give up resisting. Before going up the mountain, I had already put elemental sealing powder in your tea. Your elemental energy is sealed and your whole body is numb and stiff. There's no way you can escape. Don't forget, I am the #1 pill master in the Imperial City. In order to deal with you, I spent a whole half a month to refine the elemental sealing powder. All right, I won't talk nonsense with you. The god-seizing pearl has already been nurtured in your dantian for 3 years. It's time to see the light of day again, hee. As she sneered, Ling Yunfei stretched out her hand and slapped towards Ji Tianqing's abdomen dantian. Red flames burst out from her palm again. Ji Tianqing was so angry that his eyes were about to split open, but he was powerless to resist. He could only roar, Ling Yunfei, you sinister and despicable villain. I will never let you go. Ling Yunfei's expression became even colder. The elemental energy burst out from her palm increased by 30%, and the red flames became even brighter. Bam! Ji Tianqing was hit in his dantian and instantly spat out a mouthful of blood. In the blood, there was a dark red pearl the size of a peanut. It was transparent like glass and emitted a faint red light. This was the god-seizing pearl. It contained Ji Tianqing's 3 years of cultivation and thick Xianjian bloodline power. Ling Yunfei picked up the god-seizing pearl and observed it for a moment. Her face was full of gratification. Xianjian bloodline is indeed extraordinary. 3 years to nurture the god-seizing pearl to this extent. Ji Tianqing, I really have to thank you. Ji Tianqing was so angry that he gritted his teeth. He endured the serious injuries on his body and roared angrily, Ling Yunfei, even if you took away the god-seizing pearl, with the talent of my Xianjian bloodline, I am still a martial arts genius. I will recover my strength very soon. At that time, I will repay today's hatred tenfold. Ling Yunfei suddenly laughed disdainfully. Ha ha. Ji Tianqing, you have underestimated the power of the god-seizing pearl. Not only did it take away your power, it also took away your Xianjian bloodline. From now on, you are a cripple who can't cultivate. How can you take revenge? You. Ji Tianqing was already seriously injured. After being stimulated like this, his qi and blood suddenly flowed backward. His vision turned black and he fainted. At this time, a handsome young man with a feminine temperament walked out from behind the ancient tree. When Ling Yunfei saw the handsome young man, she immediately revealed a charming smile. She quickly went up to him and handed him the god-seizing pearl. Little prince, it's done. This god-seizing pearl should be returned to its rightful owner. The handsome young man took the god-seizing pearl and hugged Ling Yunfei in his arms. He smiled and said, Fei Fei, you have suffered a lot for me in these 3 years. Don't worry, I will not let you down. Ling Yunfei revealed a happy smile and hugged the handsome young man's neck. She whispered, Little prince, Yunfei is willing to do anything for you. Little prince, you have to refine the God-seizing pearl as soon as possible. Soon, you will be famous all over the world. The new book has officially started its journey. Brothers and sisters, please add it to the bookshelf. If you think it is good, please give me a few recommendation votes. Thank you. Chapter 2. In a daze, Ji Tianqing woke up. He only felt a splitting headache, and his chest and dantian felt as if they were being pricked by needles. He opened his eyes with difficulty and found himself lying on a familiar bed. Hearing the sound of sobbing, he slowly turned his head and saw a maid wearing a green dress sitting by the bed, secretly wiping her tears. "Huan Ji Tianqing weakly called out. Huan froze for a moment and immediately raised her head. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had woken up, she immediately revealed an excited expression. "That's great. Eldest young master, you're finally awake." "Woo-woo. You've been unconscious for so many days." Huan was worried to death. Huan was Ji Tianqing's personal maid. Not only was she cute, but she also grew up with Ji Tianqing. The two of them were like siblings. Ji Tianqing woke up a lot. He slowly sat up and looked around. Only then did he realize that he was in his own room in the Ji mansion. "Huan who saved me." Huan wiped away the tears on her pretty face and quickly replied, "Eldest young master, it was Miss Yunfei who brought you back. You've been unconscious since you came back." "Ling Yunfei? She was the one who sent me back?" Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he secretly clenched his fists. He thought of another matter and asked in a deep voice, "Huan how long have I been unconscious?" "Eldest young master, you've been unconscious for 5 days and 5 nights. 5 days and 5 nights? Ji Tianqing's expression changed, and he involuntarily shouted, "Then the entrance test of the Sky Pillar sect? Didn't I pass it already?" Hearing the words entrance test, Huan expression became a bit ugly. She immediately lowered her head and remained silent. Ji Tianqing saw that her expression was strange and quickly asked, "Huan, quickly tell me, what happened during the 5 days I was unconscious?" "Eldest young master." Huan's voice carried a sobbing tone. She stuttered, not daring to say anything. Ji Tianqing had a bad premonition and became even more anxious. "Huan tell me quickly." Huan hesitated for a moment before telling the truth. "Eldest young master, Miss Yunfei sent you back to the mansion 5 days ago. You've been unconscious the whole time, which made master very anxious. Miss Yunfei came to see you twice, and each time, she brought the Ling family's godly doctor to treat you. The godly doctor said that you are fine and will wake up after a few days of rest. The day before yesterday, the Sky Pillar sex test began. Miss Yunfei successfully passed the test and brought people to the estate to persuade Master to carry you to participate in the test. Master hesitated and was worried, but she said that your greatest wish was to enter the Sky Pillar sect. She also said that although you were unconscious, it wouldn't affect the strength test, so Master agreed. Speaking up to hear, Huan paused for a moment. Her small face was filled with anger, and her eyes were filled with tears. She sneaked a glance at Ji Tianqing's expression before continuing in a small voice. "Later, you were tested while you were unconscious and were only at the 3rd level of the body refinement realm. You didn't pass the Sky Pillar sex test and even became the laughingstock of the entire Imperial City. Now, everyone in the Imperial City knows about this matter." Ji Tianqing's face instantly turned as white as paper. He was so angry that his entire body trembled, and he almost spat out blood. He clenched his fists tightly and roared in his heart, "Ling Yunfei, you bastard! I've treated you well for the past 3 years, but you stole my cultivation and ruined my reputation. Slut, you really have a heart as venomous as a snake and scorpion. You're actually so vicious." Seeing Ji Tianqing about to go crazy with the veins on his forehead popping, Huan immediately started crying again. "Eldest young master, you have to calm down, don't be angry and harm your body." Ji Tianqing took a few deep breaths and suppressed his anger with great difficulty. But at this moment, the sound of footsteps came from outside the door. A young man dressed as a servant rushed into the room and shouted with an anxious face, "Eldest young master, something bad has happened. Something has happened." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and his face became even more unsightly. "What happened?" The young servant bowed to Ji Tianqing and quickly said, "Eldest young master, Miss Yunfei has come to the residence. She brought the marriage contract and threatened to break off the engagement. She is in the main hall right now. Master is currently pleading with her." Ji Tianqing's face suddenly became gloomy and his eyes were filled with dense anger. "I'll go take a look," he shouted in a low voice, put on his clothes, and got off the bed. He quickly left the room with the young servant and rushed to the main hall of the Ji residence. Not long after, he arrived outside the main hall and saw that there were more than 10 people outside. They were all looking into the main hall. These people were the family members and young disciples of the Ji residence. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had arrived, everyone had a complicated expression on their faces as they started whispering to each other. Ji Tianqing expressionlessly walked through the crowd. Just as he arrived at the entrance of the main hall, he heard a familiar woman's voice. "Lord Ji, although you and my father agreed on a marriage contract for me and Ji Tianqing 3 years ago, this was under the condition that Ji Tianqing and I were of equal status. Now, Ji Tianqing has suddenly become a trash in the body refinement realm. This matter is known by everyone, and he has become the laughingstock of the imperial city. Lord Ji, ask yourself honestly, is he still worthy of me? Our Ling family doesn't want to lose face because of him and be ridiculed by the imperial city's citizens." There was no doubt that this was Ling Yunfei's voice. "I just passed the Sky Pillar Sect's entrance test the day before yesterday. After passing the competition next month, I will officially become a disciple of the Sky Pillar Sect. Lord Ji, right now Ji Tianqing and I are no longer people of the same world. I will become a star in the 9 heavens, and he will only be the soil underground. I must cancel this marriage contract." Following Ling Yunfei's words, a deep middle-aged man's voice sounded. "Miss Yunfei, our Ji family and your Ling family have been friends for generations. Your father and I are like brothers. Even if Tianqing suddenly met with a calamity and his cultivation declined, this matter was very sudden. Please don't mention canceling the marriage contract for the time being on account of the friendship between our 2 families. At the very least, you have to wait until Tianqing wakes up." Ji Tianqing was too familiar with this voice. This was his father, the current patriarch of the Ji family, Ji Changkong. At this time, Ji Changkong's voice sounded again. Moreover, Tianqing is the #1 genius in the imperial city. Once his injuries recover, he will definitely rise again. Our Ji family's Shenzhen bloodline is the most complete. In the future, he will definitely become an origin core expert. Miss Yunfei, please wait patiently on account of your 3 years of relationship with Tianqing." Hearing his father pleading with Ling Yunfei, the anger in Ji Tianqing's heart surged even more violently. He immediately stepped into the hall. "Father, don't beg her, tell her to withdraw." Chapter 3. In the main hall, Ji Changkong was sitting on the main seat with a painting of a flood dragon hanging on the wall behind him. He was about 40 years old and had a tall and sturdy body. His face was resolute and angular, giving him the majesty of a superior. However, his expression was not good and his eyes were filled with worry. It was obvious that he had been extremely anxious during the past few days when Ji Tianqing had been unconscious. He was pleading with Ling Yunfei when he heard Ji Tianqing's voice. He looked up at the door. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had woken up, he immediately revealed an excited smile. The stone in his heart was finally lifted. "Tianqing, you're finally awake. That's great." Ji Tianqing walked into the hall and looked coldly at Ling Yunfei. He then glanced at the 2 Ling family elders behind her. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had arrived, Ling Yunfei's face was cold as she said in an icy tone, "Ji Tianqing, it's good that you're awake. Let's settle this matter today. You've already become a well-known piece of trash. Don't bother me anymore. Even if you beg me now, I won't take pity on you." Ji Tianqing's eyes were filled with anger as he sneered. "Ling Yunfei, you're so vicious. So this was all your scheme. I really didn't expect that you would be so sinister and despicable when I treated you wholeheartedly and cared for you." After saying that, he raised his head and looked at Ji Changkong, who was sitting on the main seat, and said in a firm tone, "Father, Ling Yunfei is a despicable and shameless bitch. I, Ji Tianqing, disdain to marry her. If she wants to break off the engagement, then let her. My Ji family will never compromise with such a person." Ji Changkong originally wanted Ji Tianqing to say a few good words to temporarily stabilize Ling Yunfei. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would agree to break off the engagement on the spot. His expression changed as he shouted in shock and anger, "Tianqing, are you crazy?" Ji Tianqing didn't explain anything. He turned around and took the marriage certificate from Ling Yunfei's hand. He said coldly, Ling Yunfei, the Ji family takes back the marriage certificate. From now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other." Ling Yunfei was scolded by Ji Tianqing in public. Although she was angry, seeing that he took back the marriage contract, she held back her anger and sneered. "Very good, Ji Tianqing. You know your place." Ji Tianqing didn't want to look at her and coldly shouted, "You can get lost now." However, Ling Yunfei, remember this. I will return today's humiliation tenfold. Haha. Naive. Ling Yunfei sneered disdainfully. She didn't even bother to say goodbye and left with the two elders of the Ling family. After Ling Yunfei and the other two left, Ji Changkong could no longer suppress his anger and shouted, "Tianqing, are you stupid? Do you know that if you agree to break off the engagement with the Ling family, how are you going to face others in the future? The Ling family wants to destroy you." Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with anger and hatred, but he looked very calm on the surface. He said expressionlessly, "Father, I have my own ideas. This engagement must be broken off." "Father, please calm down. I will take my leave first." After saying that, he turned and left the hall. Ji Changkong's face was ashen. He couldn't help but smash the pear-wood table in front of him. After Ling Yunfei walked out of the Ji family, she got into a carriage outside the gate. There was a handsome young man with a feminine temperament sitting in the carriage. When he saw Ling Yunfei come in, he hugged her in his arms and asked softly, "Fei Fei, is the matter settled?" Ling Yunfei snuggled in his arms like a little bird and nodded. "Yes, it's settled. That brat Ji Tianqing is quite tactful." He agreed without hesitation. "However, I don't understand. Ji Tianqing is already crippled. Why don't we just kill him? Why do we still want to keep him alive?" The handsome young man sneered and said in a low voice, "The Ji family is one of the four great families after all. They have deep roots in the capital. If Ji Tianqing is killed, Ji Changkong will definitely go crazy. At that time, this matter will implicate us and the Ling family. It will be troublesome in the end." Ling Yunfei immediately understood and nodded. "That's good. Anyway, Ji Tianqing is already crippled. After this matter is over, we can casually move a finger and kill him." After Ji Tianqing returned to his room, he let Huan leave the room and closed the door. He burned the marriage contract and sat cross-legged on the bed to check his injuries and strength. He subconsciously circulated his true essence, but found that there was no true essence in his body. There was also a tearing pain in his dantian. After trying a few times, he was in so much pain that his face was pale and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. He had no choice but to accept reality. Just as Huan said, he had fallen from the true essence realm to the body refinement realm. In this world, martial artists were divided into the body refinement realm, true essence realm, Tongxian realm, and Yuandan realm. Each realm was divided into 9 grades from the lowest to the highest. As for above the Yuandan realm, it was said that there were sky origin realm martial artists who could fly. However, that was only a legend. In the past 100 years, there had not been a sky origin realm martial artist in Clear Sky Country. Ji Tianqing was the same as other martial artists. He started his cultivation from the first level of the body refinement realm. Since he was 8 years old, he used all kinds of methods to train his body and cultivate martial skills to increase his strength. 3 years ago, he broke through the 9th level of the body refinement realm. He absorbed the energy of heaven and earth and condensed it into a true essence cyclone in his dantian, reaching the true essence realm. In the following 3 years, his strength soared and improved rapidly. Last month, he successfully broke through to the 7th level of the true essence realm. At the age of 17, he was already at the 7th level of the true essence realm. He could be called the number 1 genius in the capital. In addition, he had awakened the Ji family's ancestors' Xian sword bloodline. His future was limitless, and he had high hopes of becoming a Yuan Dan realm martial artist. But now it was all gone. He fell from the true essence realm to the body refinement realm and became a trash at the 3rd level of the body refinement realm. Furthermore, after he carefully checked his internal organs, he found that his Xian sword bloodline had disappeared. The truth was just as Ling Yunfei said. Not only did the God-stealing pearl take away his power, it also took away his Xian sword bloodline. The Xian sword bloodline was his biggest reliance. With this bloodline in his body, he was a martial arts genius. Sooner or later, he would be able to return to the peak. But now, the Xian sword bloodline was taken away. His hopes of rising again were destroyed. Ji Tianqing was filled with anger. The hatred in his heart had reached its limit. He could not wait to kill Ling Yunfei. His heart was filled with unwillingness. He muttered softly, "Even if my Xian sword bloodline is gone, I am no longer a genius. But my cultivation experience from these few years is still here. I want to cultivate again. I must return to the true essence realm." Therefore, he placed both hands flat on his knees and activated his family's golden leaf mystic skill. But before he could feel the energy of heaven and earth, there was a tearing pain in his dantian. Ji Tianqing could not help but let out a muffled groan. His head was dizzy. He closed his eyes. An image appeared in his mind. It seemed to be the image of his dantian. He saw that his dantian had disappeared, leaving behind a belly button-sized black hole. My dantian. It actually disappeared. Ji Tianqing was stunned. A sense of despair welled up in his heart. The dantian was the place where a martial artist stored his true essence. It was also the foundation and core of martial arts cultivation. If a martial artist's dantian was damaged, he would never be able to step into the true essence realm. He could only be a weakling in the body-refining realm for the rest of his life. His entire dantian had disappeared and turned into a black hole. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was filled with grief and indignation. But at this moment, the black hole in his dantian suddenly burst out with a strong devouring force and swept his mind into it. Ji Tianqing fainted. His body fell limply on the bed, and there was no more movement. But his mind was still awake. Passing through the black hole in his dantian, he came to a dark and mysterious space. This was a vast space. The ground was a barren wasteland. Many weathered rocks were scattered in the cold and hard soil. The sky was gray and overcast. It was filled with an icy aura of death. It was very oppressive. Wisps of gray fog floated in the air. It covered the distance in a hazy way, making him unable to see clearly. Ji Tianqing's mind was like a candle flame. It flickered in the gray fog and slowly floated forward. What is this place? Ji Tianqing was filled with doubt and shock. He could not help but look around. Suddenly, he saw a blurry, huge black shadow in the distant wasteland. It was like a huge mountain. He increased his speed and floated over. Very soon, he was close to that black shadow. When he came close, he saw clearly that it was not a huge mountain. It was a stone tablet that was tens of thousands of feet tall. The stone tablet was completely black. It looked like a huge sword that stood between heaven and earth. Chapter 4. The black sword steel stood between heaven and earth, exuding an incomparably majestic aura that could suppress heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing saw that the black sword steel was covered with traces of wind, frost, and time. It looked very ancient. This sword steel had been around for a very long time, as if it was as old as heaven and earth and had existed since ancient times. He looked up at the tall sword steel and saw 4 mottled words engraved on the sword steel. Every stroke of the words was complex, vigorous, and powerful. It seemed to contain an unparalleled sharp sword intent that could pierce through the steel and tear the sky apart. Ji Tianqing only took a few more glances and was suppressed by the sword intent contained in the 4 words. A deep sense of reverence grew in his heart. The 4 words were very mysterious and ancient. They were not words of this era at all. He had never seen them before. But strangely, there was a vague feeling in his mind, and he recognized the 4 words. Kenshin's tomb. Kenshin's tomb? This is a graveyard? Ji Tianqing was puzzled and thought to himself, no wonder it looks so desolate and gloomy. It's also filled with the aura of death. However, I've only heard of some strong people calling themselves swordmasters. Even the number 1 swordsman in the Azure Cloud Kingdom only dares to call himself a swordmaster. There's actually someone called Kenshin? Then what realm was he in? Ji Tianqing couldn't understand what kind of strength and realm the sword god was. But he could guess that Kenshin's tomb was so majestic. He must have been a top expert when he was alive. He retracted his gaze from the sword steel and continued to float towards the sword steel. After a while, he arrived at the bottom of the sword steel and sized up the surrounding wasteland. He saw that on the left and right sides of the sword steel, there were more than 10 black tombstones standing in a row. Ji Tianqing counted. There were a total of 18 tombstones, 9 on each side. He walked to the left row of tombstones and found that there were ancient words engraved on each tombstone. Some of the tombstones had more words, as many as hundreds of words. Some of the tombstones had fewer words, only 1 or 2 sentences, or more than 20 words. To Ji Tianqing, these ancient and mysterious characters should be unfamiliar. However, after staring at the first tombstone for a while, he had a vague feeling in his mind and actually recognized those complicated and obscure words. Looking at those ancient words, he could not help but recite them in his heart. Initial level of Sword Tao, Sword Heart. The so-called Sword Heart is to temper the sword body and condense the sword heart. At the peak of this Tao, one can reach the state of having no sword in hand, but the sword is in one's heart. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing could not help but stop. His heart was filled with shock and disbelief. He had never heard of these two sentences before. Moreover, it was completely inconsistent with his cultivation experience and knowledge. It was even subversive. He had been practicing the 10 mysterious swordsmanship that was passed down in his family since he was a child. From the first day he started practicing the sword, he had been practicing with a treasured sword in his hand. Not only him, but even the sword masters of the Qingyun kingdom had to use swords in order to display their swordsmanship. Even the #1 swordsman in the royal Azure dynasty, the sword grandmaster, never left his sword and trained day and night. However, the words on this tombstone said that the first step to practicing the Sword Tao was the Sword Heart. After mastering it, one could reach the state of having no sword in hand, but the sword is in one's heart. Wasn't this nonsense? Without a sword in hand, how could one practice the sword? How could one display their swordsmanship? Ji Tianqing subconsciously thought, the words on this tombstone are most likely the words of a whimsical lunatic. It doesn't conform to the common sense of martial arts cultivation at all. However, he thought about it again. This was Kenshin's tomb. The words on the tombstone were most likely left behind by Kenshin when he was alive. Even if it was not, it must be related to Kenshin. Therefore, he continued to read with a suspicious and curious attitude. The first level of the Sword Heart is to destroy one's dantian. With one's own essence as the foundation, supplemented by the qi of heaven and earth, condense the sword energy and nurture the sword embryo in the body. Ji Tianqing was a little dumbfounded. He felt that these words were an eye-opener for him. His 10 years of understanding and 3 views had been overturned. Oh my God! What kind of evil technique is this Sword Heart? To cultivate the Sword Heart, one must first destroy one's dantian? The dantian is the foundation of a martial artist's cultivation. It's even more important than their lifeblood. Who would destroy their dantian to cultivate this kind of evil technique? Unless they're crazy. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. A strange idea popped up in his mind. Normal martial artists can't destroy their dantian to cultivate the Sword Heart. I'm different. My dantian has already disappeared. I can't reach the true energy realm in this lifetime. I can only be a body refinement realm trash in this lifetime. Maybe I can try to cultivate it? Ji Tianqing still felt that the Sword Heart was against common sense and did not conform to the common sense of martial arts. It was very likely to be an evil technique. However, he was already forced into a desperate situation. If he wanted to recover his strength and take revenge on Ling Yunfei, he would not let go of any opportunity to become stronger. Next, he carefully read the words on the first tombstone. After a while, he roughly understood. If I want to cultivate the Sword Heart Tao, I have to refine my body into qi. Using my own essence qi to combine with heaven and earth yuan qi, condensing it into sword qi. Then using the sword qi to nurture a sword embryo in my body. Ji Tianqing deliberated for a moment. He felt that this cultivation method was very novel and strange. Perhaps it might really succeed. He memorized the words on the first tombstone and looked at the second tombstone. There were fewer words on this tombstone, only over 20 words. What was recorded was a meditation cultivation circulation route. He memorized the 20 over words cultivation chant and looked at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th tombstones. In the end, he discovered that the words on the last few tombstones were getting more and more profound. Even if he could recognize the words on the tombstones, he could not understand what those words meant. He forced himself to take a few more glances and felt mentally exhausted. His thoughts also became chaotic. Ji Tianqing knew that his strength realm was too low. He had not started cultivating the Sword Heart Tao yet. If he forcefully looked at the profound cultivation method, it was very likely that he would lose his rationality and become a lunatic. Therefore, he quickly withdrew his gaze and stopped looking at the tombstones. Biting off more than I can chew. Whether the Sword Heart Tao is an evil technique or not, it must be cultivated and comprehended step by step. I'll leave here first and try the cultivation method of the first level of the Sword Heart Tao. Ji Tianqing had just thought of leaving when the mysterious space and the 18 ancient tombstones immediately became illusory and blurry. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing's mind returned to its original position, and he woke up. He sat up from the bed and opened his eyes to look around. He found that he was still in the room. Outside the window, the curtain of night had fallen and the lights were lit. He picked up the teacup at the bedside and drank a mouthful of tea. He rubbed his eyebrows tiredly and muttered in a low voice, "Why do I feel like I'm dreaming? I don't know if that Kenshin's tomb and the 18 tombstones are real or just a dream." Ji Tianqing frowned and recalled. The words on the first and second tombstones clearly appeared in his mind. He hesitated for a while and decided to take a risk and try to cultivate the Sword Heart Tao. Chapter 5. Ji Tianqing walked to the corner of the wall and turned the inkstone on the bookcase. The bookcase flipped over and revealed a secret passage. He entered the secret passage and walked a few feet before he entered a hidden secret room. This secret room was specially built by the Ji mansion for him to cultivate in. The secret room was 10 feet wide, and the ceiling was inlaid with a few luminous pearls, emitting a faint light. There were many secret compartments in the walls, storing all kinds of weapons, secret manuals, and pills. In the middle of the secret room, there were many patterns and lines formed by ravines. This was an energy-gathering array. It could gather the energy of heaven and earth to help a martial artist cultivate. Its effect was very magical. Ji Tianqing walked to the center of the energy-gathering array and sat down cross-legged. He quickly calmed down. He silently recited the first level of the path of the sword in his heart and began to cultivate for the first time. Under normal circumstances, a martial artist at the third level of the body refinement realm would not be able to cultivate internal strength or absorb the energy of heaven and earth. They could only practice fist arts, sword arts, and other martial arts to temper their body. But Ji Tianqing was different. He had fallen from the true element realm and had the experience of the true element realm. Moreover, he was not like a normal martial artist who absorbed the energy of heaven and earth and stored it in his dantian. He did not have a dantian and would not store the energy of heaven and earth he absorbed. Instead, he would condense it into sword energy. After 15 minutes, he entered a state of cultivation. All the pores on his body opened up and absorbed the energy of heaven and earth from all directions. This energy was gathered by the energy-gathering array and was very rich and pure. The first level of the path of the sword required one to control the energy of heaven and earth and condense it into sword energy in 12 acupuncture points in the body. When the 12 rays of sword energy were successfully condensed and the sword energy was strong enough, they would be gathered in the dantian and condense into a sword embryo. As long as the sword embryo was successfully condensed, the first level of the path of the sword would be completed. This was Ji Tianqing's first time cultivating the path of the sword. He did not dare to be greedy and could only explore step by step. He gathered the energy of heaven and earth at the Huizong acupuncture point in his right arm and tried to condense the sword energy. This process was very difficult and painful. The energy stopped at the Huizong acupuncture point for a long time, causing his arm to become stiff and numb. The pain was unbearable. He had only persevered for an hour before cold sweat appeared on his forehead and his entire body began to tremble. For hours passed quickly. He tried 5 times, but all of them ended in failure. He was still unable to condense the sword qi. He was a little annoyed and frustrated, and the thought of giving up flashed through his mind. But when he thought of the humiliation that Ling Yunfei brought to him, as well as the hatred of his bloodline and power being taken away, he gritted his teeth and endured it. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. When Ji Tianqing tried to condense the sword energy for the 9th time, he finally succeeded. His spiritual qi merged with the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, forming a toothpick-sized golden sword qi, quietly floating in the Huizong meridian on his arm. Even though the golden sword energy was constantly stimulating and tempering his Huizong acupoint, causing him unbearable pain, it was still not enough. However, he was extremely excited, and his heart was filled with excitement. Great! I really can cultivate the Tao of the sword heart. Even if I don't have a dantian, I can still become a sword Tao expert if I cultivate the Tao of the heart of the sword. Ji Tianqing did not rest and continued to cultivate the Tao of the heart of the sword. He wanted to condense the sword qi in the Yangqi acupoint. This time, with his previous experience, the the success rate of condensing the sword qi had indeed increased. He only used 5.5 hours, and after 7 attempts, he managed to condense a sword qi in the Yangqi acupoint. I finally have 2 sword qis. As long as I can cultivate 12 sword qis, I will be able to condense the sword embryo very quickly. At that time, my strength will definitely increase greatly. Ji Tianqing revealed a gratified smile and ended his cultivation for the time being. When he left the secret room and returned to his room, he realized that the night had passed and it was already bright outside the window. Huan had already woken up and brought a basin and a towel to help him wash up. After he finished washing up, Huan brought breakfast in a food box. Huan served him breakfast, but she was a little absent-minded and looked like she wanted to say something but stopped. Ji Tianqing saw that something was wrong and asked her, Huan, do you have something you want to say to me? Huan hesitated for a moment before saying in a small voice, Eldest young master, yesterday you agreed to the Ling family's annulment of the marriage. This matter has already spread throughout the imperial city. The rumors outside have spread into the residence and angered master quite a bit. He seems to be a little unwell and didn't eat this morning. Ji Tianqing put down his bowl and chopsticks, his face revealing a touch of worry. The impact of this matter is too great. It's normal for father to be unable to accept it for the time being. He will only calm down after a period of time. Since he's unwell, the residents will naturally invite a doctor to take a look. There's no need to worry. I won't go see father, so as to avoid him getting angry again. Huan, I need to rest well these few days. Don't let anyone disturb me. As for the people outside, let them say whatever they want. There's no need to pay attention to them. Huan nodded obediently and continued. Eldest young master, this morning I heard from the people in the residence that Master Xue of the Spiritual Medicine Hall has come out of seclusion. Master Xue has come out of seclusion? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and a smile appeared on his face. The Spiritual Medicine Hall was one of the most authoritative medicine halls in the imperial city. Master Xue was also a famous genius doctor in the imperial city. Even the Ling family, who were experts in refining pills, had to be courteous to Master Xue. After all, Master Xue's medical and pill refining skills were ranked in the top 3 in the imperial city. He was on par with the Ling family's old ancestor and the imperial physician king. The Ji residents had also had dealings with Master Xue. They had purchased many pills from the Spiritual Medicine Hall for the Ji family's disciples to cultivate or treat their injuries. Huan looked at Ji Tianqing with a face full of hope and said seriously, Master Xue has been in seclusion for 3 months. It's said that he has refined a furnace of black-level upper-grade pills. Many people have gone to see him today. Eldest young master, you should also go see Master Xue. With Master Xue's medical skills, he will definitely be able to treat your injuries and help you recover your strength. When the time comes, those bastards who laughed at you in the imperial city will have to shut their stinky mouths. Ji Tianqing's mouth revealed a bitter smile. He thought to himself, silly girl, my black sword bloodline and Dantian have both disappeared. Even if Master Xue were to help me, he would not be able to heal me. Huan saw that he was silent and said anxiously, Eldest young master, don't you want to recover your strength? The Ling family humiliated you. I want to fight them to the death. Besides, you have to think about the old master. If you can recover your strength, the old master will be very happy. Huan tried to persuade him a few more times. Ji Tianqing could not resist her stubbornness and nodded in agreement. All right, Huan accompany me to the Spiritual Medicine Hall later. Only then did Huan reveal a happy smile and quickly nodded in agreement. Ji Tianqing looked at the courtyard outside the door. His eyes surged with light as he thought to himself, although the Sky Pillar Sex entrance test has passed, those who pass the test will still have to participate in next month's large competition. Only those who obtain the top 10 in the large competition can become a true disciple of the Sky Pillar sect. I still have a month's time. If I can return to the true element realm within a month, I will be able to wash away my humiliation in the large competition and get my revenge. Chapter 6. After breakfast, Ji Tianqing took Huan to the Spirit Medicine Hall in a carriage. On the way, Ji Tianqing and Huan sat in the carriage and chatted. They inadvertently talked about Master Xue's newly refined pills. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, Huaner, there will be a lot of people going to the Spirit Medicine Hall to see Master Shui today, and there will be people from other big families among them. Huaner blinked her big eyes and asked, Young Master, why? Ji Tianqing explained, because profound level upper grade pills are too rare. Not to mention true energy realm martial artists. Even Tongxian realm martial artists would be moved. If a profound level upper grade pill can be used, true energy realm martial artists will have a great increase in strength. Even Tongxian realm martial artists will benefit greatly from it. The grades of pills I know are divided into ordinary pills, origin level pills, and profound level pills. Each grade of pill is further divided into low grade, middle grade, upper grade, and top grade. For example, I usually only take origin level pills. Every month I take 20 or so pills, and it costs over 10,000 silvers. And profound level pills are even more expensive. Each pill costs over 10,000 silvers. This time, Master Shui's profound level upper grade pills can be sold for 100,000 silvers each. Moreover, he may not be willing to sell. One pill costs 100,000 silvers? Wouldn't that be enough to buy 10 houses in the imperial city? Huaner was stunned. She opened her small mouth in disbelief. Ji Tianqing smiled and didn't say anything else. Not long after, the carriage arrived at the Spirit Medicine Hall and stopped at the entrance. Before Ji Tianqing got off the carriage, he heard a burst of noise and discussion coming from the entrance. He got off the carriage and saw that the Spirit Medicine Hall's entrance was crowded with people. There were at least 40 people. These people were all aristocratic families in the imperial city. They were all dressed gorgeously and had an imposing appearance. Ji Tianqing casually glanced around and saw many of the aristocratic family's young masters. They were all carrying luxurious gift boxes in their hands. Although the Spirit Medicine Hall's entrance was wide open, there were only 2 black-clothed guards guarding the entrance. But the 40 or so nobles didn't dare to enter. They could only wait in a long line outside the entrance. Ji Tianqing got off the carriage and walked towards the entrance with Huaner. Everyone present suddenly turned their heads and sneered and ridiculed them. Huh! Everyone look, the Ji family's young master is here. Tisk, TSK, the imperial city's #1 genius. The Ling family's engagement was cancelled. If it was me, I would have just hanged myself. Are you stupid? Why would you kill yourself? With the little beauty Huan accompanying me, I can enjoy myself every night. Of course I want to live and enjoy myself. Many of the rich and powerful young masters were discussing in an eccentric manner. When they spoke, they were beaming with joy and gloating to the extreme. Ji Tianqing ignored them and walked to the entrance without changing his expression. He said to the green-clothed guard, Please report that Ji Tianqing is here to visit Master Shui. The black-clothed guard glanced at him and expressionlessly said, Please wait. Then he turned around and went into the Spirit Medicine Hall. In the Spirit Medicine Hall's guest hall, Master Shui, who was wearing a purple robe, was sitting in the main seat. He was drinking tea and chatting with the guests. Master Shui was about 60 years old. His hair and beard were all white. The long beard on his chin reached his chest. Although he was old, he had the strength of a mystic and lightning cultivator. He often took elixirs to maintain his appearance, so his complexion was ruddy. He looked like a middle-aged man in his 40s. The guest sitting next to him was a young girl in a white dress. She was beautiful and had an elegant and refined temperament. She held a luxurious white jade gift box in her hands and handed it to Master Shui. She smiled and said, Master Shui, Yunfei heard that you came out of seclusion last night. She came early in the morning to celebrate. These 2,000-year-old jade lotus fruits are a token of my appreciation. Please accept them. Master Shui raised his eyebrows. His eyes flashed with surprise. He smiled and took the white jade gift box. Aya, niece Yunfei is truly considerate. The 1,000-year-old jade lotus fruit is a top medicinal ingredient that can only be found by chance. Niece, you even got 2 of them at once. This old man will remember your kindness. Ling Yunfei smiled faintly and said in a tactful voice, As the saying goes, a treasured sword is given to a hero. Only this kind of top medicinal ingredient is worthy of Master Shui's status. Moreover, Master Shui has always been on good terms with our Ling family. Yunfei came here to greet you on behalf of my father. Ha ha ha. Then this old man will thank niece Yunfei. Master Shui let out a hearty laugh as he took out a small white jade bottle from his sleeve. Niece Yunfei, here are 2 spirit-nourishing pills. This old man refined them last night. These pills will definitely increase your cultivation and help you smoothly enter the Sky Pillar sect through the large competition. Ling Yunfei revealed a joyful expression and quickly accepted Master Shue's gift. She had just accepted the small white jade bottle and was about to say a few words of thanks. At this time, a green-clothed guard walked into the hall. He bowed and reporting to Elder Shui, the eldest young master of the Ji family. Ji Tianqing requests an audience. Ji Tianqing? Master Shui raised his eyebrows and asked in confusion, "What is he doing here?" After saying that, he secretly glanced at Ling Yunfei. Ling Yunfei's expression also changed slightly. A trace of mockery flashed through her eyes. She quickly smiled and explained to Master Shui, "Master Shui, you have been refining pills in seclusion for 3 months and only came out last night. Perhaps you still don't know about Ji Tianqing's matter." Ling Yunfei immediately told him about Ji Tianqing turning into a cripple and breaking off the engagement with her. Master Shue's expression changed a few times. He then shouted at the green-clothed guard, "Coax him away. A disgraced cripple still wants to beg this old man to save him?" Understood. The green-clothed guard cupped his hands and left the hall. Ji Tianqing stood at the entrance of the elixir hall and waited patiently with a calm expression. Even though the rich and powerful children next to him whispered and looked at him with contempt from time to time, they let out mocking chuckles. However, he turned a blind eye and turned a deaf ear to them. He tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart. He knew very well that when he was still the #1 genius in the imperial city, these rich and powerful children could only look up to him and envy him in their hearts. However, they did not dare to offend him. In the past, these rich and powerful children had all bowed to him and flattered him. Therefore, now that he had become a cripple and a laughingstock, these people would double the ridicule and insult him. This was reality and also human nature. At this time, the green-clothed guard returned to the entrance. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a cold expression and said contemptuously, "Boy, Master Shui does not want to see you. You can leave now." The nobles and aristocrats outside the gate immediately burst into laughter and began to gloat over the misfortune of others. Ji Tianqing's expression changed slightly. He secretly clenched his fists. Huaner was so angry that her face turned pale. She shouted at the green-clothed guard, "Bastard! Do you know who you are talking to? This is our Ji clan's eldest young master." Before she could finish speaking, the green-clothed guard sneered and said in a mocking tone, "How could I not know the Ji clan's eldest young master? Now everyone in the imperial city knows him. He is the #1 genius in the 3rd level of the body refinement realm." Huanber was so angry that her whole body trembled. She clenched her teeth and was about to teach him a lesson. Ji Tianqing said with a cold expression, "Huanber, forget it. Let's go." Huan'er angrily glared at the green-clothed guard. Then she followed Ji Tianqing and left. However, just as Ji Tianqing walked out of the crowd, a luxuriously dressed young man in a blue robe rushed out and blocked his path. Brothers, the new book is officially uploaded. Please add it to your collection and vote for it. Little he needs your support. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 7. The blue-robed youth was about 17 or 18 years old. He had a tall and straight figure and a handsome face. In his hand, he held a white jade fan. However, he had a frivolous air about him. Between his eyebrows, there was a wretched and vulgar look. "Ayo! Isn't this our #1 genius, young Master Ji?" The blue-robed young man squinted at Ji Tianqing and sneered in a strange way. "Young Master Ji, you also have a day like this? Even Master Shui disdains to see trash like you. TSK, 3rd level of the body refinement realm. You can't even compare to my horse servant, ha." Ji Tianqing's face darkened. He coldly stared at him and shouted, "Gu Hao, who gave you the guts to be so arrogant in front of this young master? What? Have you already forgotten the lesson I taught you last year?" Gu Hao, the 3rd young master of the Gu clan, was at the 5th level of the body refinement realm. He was a famous hedonistic young master in the imperial city. Although the Gu clan's power could not be compared to the Ji clan, it was still second only to the 4 great clans. Last year in June, Gu Hao coveted Huaner's beauty and took liberties with her in public. When Ji Tianqing found out about this, he rushed into the brothel on his horse and beat up Gu Hao, who was drinking wine. He was bedridden for 3 months. This incident caused a sensation in the entire city. Gu Hao also became the laughing stock of the common people. However, No matter how humiliated Gu Hao was, he did not dare to seek revenge from Ji Tianqing. He could only endure until today. Today, when he heard Ji Tianqing mention this incident, Gu Hao's face turned ashen. He angrily shouted, "Ji Tianqing, you useless bastard. Last year, I only took liberties with your servant girl. You actually broke 4 of my ribs, and even broke my leg. I've always remembered this grudge." As he spoke, he approached Huan with a lecherous smile. "Ji Tianqing, aren't you protective? Aren't you very fond of Huan, Today, I will not only take liberties with her. I will also molest her in front of you. Let's see what a trash like you can do to me." After speaking, Gu Hao suddenly grabbed Huan's wrist with one hand and grabbed her chest with the other. When the nobles outside the door saw this scene, they all showed expressions of schadenfreude. Everyone knew that after enduring for a year, Gu Hao was finally going to take his revenge today. Ji Tianqing's age. Gu. When Gu Hao grabbed Han'er's wrist, she let out a panicked scream and struggled desperately. Gu Hao's big hand was about to grab Huan's full and towering breasts. Tease. Although he had fallen to the 3rd level of the body refinement stage, and his strength was extremely weak, he was still a martial artist. However, he was a martial arts genius after all. He had practiced exquisite martial arts and had rich combat experience. His palm was as fast as the wind and instantly hit Gu Hao's left chest. Bang! Gu Hao's body swayed a few times, but he didn't fall. He didn't even take half a step back. He let go of Huan, who was struggling, and turned his head to look at Ji Tianqing. His face revealed a disdainful sneer. "Haha! Ji Tianqing, oh Ji Tianqing. You really are a trash at the 3rd level of the body refinement stage. Such pitiful strength. It's not even enough to tickle me. Haha." Gu Hao laughed arrogantly. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a gaze full of ridicule. The surrounding nobles all burst into laughter. They pointed at Ji Tianqing and mocked him without restraint. If it was before, Ji Tianqing's palm would have sent him flying. He would have been seriously injured and vomited blood. He might even lose his life. But now, Gu Hao was hit by his palm, but he didn't feel anything. It didn't hurt or itch. But no one noticed that when Ji Tianqing's palm hit Gu Hao, a toothpick-sized golden sword aura flew out from his palm. The golden sword aura flashed and instantly entered Gu Hao's body. At the same time, Gu Hao's laughter stopped. His body suddenly stiffened and his face became as white as paper. He felt a piercing pain in his chest and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He lowered his head in disbelief and looked at the left side of his chest. He saw that there was a rice-sized bloody hole on the left side of his chest. Fresh blood flowed out and dyed the blue robe red. Gu Hao stared at Ji Tianqing in fear and said intermittently, "Ji Tianqing, you dare kill me?" After saying that, his body went limp and fell to the ground. The crowd was silent. All the discussions and mocking laughter disappeared. The crowd was shocked by this scene. They stared at Gu Hao in disbelief. They didn't understand what had happened. Ji Tianqing was also stunned. He looked at Gu Hao with a gloomy face, and then looked at his right palm. His eyes flashed with suspicion. He only wanted to teach Gu Hao a lesson. He didn't want to kill him. He couldn't kill him in front of so many rich and powerful people. No matter how much of a hedonistic bastard Gu Hao was, he was still the 3rd son of Yunzhou's provincial governor. Ji Tianqing killed him in front of so many people. The Gu family wouldn't let it go. They would definitely take revenge on the Ji family. But now, Gu Hao was lying on the ground without any movement. It was obvious that he had stopped breathing. Ji Tianqing couldn't understand. He only used one palm and didn't use any weapon. How could Gu Hao's chest be injured and bleeding? How could he die on the spot? The crowd was silent for a few seconds. Suddenly, there was an uproar. They all shouted in shock. "Ah! Murder! Ji Tianqing killed someone on the street. Quick! Go and inform the Gu family. Gu Hao was killed by Ji Tianqing. How is this possible? Ji Tianqing is clearly a cripple. How could he kill Gu Hao with one palm?" In the blink of an eye, more than 40 rich and powerful people were in a panic. The front door became very noisy. Ji Tianqing's face was extremely gloomy. He stared at Gu Hao's corpse. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He had already predicted that he would face the Gu family's revenge. Huaner was also shocked. She only regained her senses now. She said with a sobbing voice, "Eldest young master, it's all my fault. I've implicated you." "Eldest young master," Quickly capture me and send me to the Gu family. Let me apologize with my death. Quick. Huan what nonsense are you talking about? Ji Tianqing frowned and pulled her into the carriage. Huan don't panic. Let's go home first. The carriage quickly left the spiritual medicine hall and disappeared at the end of the street in the blink of an eye. The two green-clothed guards at the entrance of the spiritual medicine hall finally regained their senses. They quickly ran into the courtyard and reported the news to Master Shui. Chapter 8. In the reception hall, Master Shui and Ling Yunfei were chatting happily. At this moment, two green-clothed guards suddenly rushed into the main hall and reported in an urgent tone, cupping their hands in obeisance. Reporting to Elder Shui, something bad has happened. Ji Tianqing killed the Gu clan's third young master Gu Hao in front of everyone. Reporting to Elder Shui, this matter just happened outside the medicine hall. Gu Hao was killed by Ji Tianqing with a single palm strike. Suddenly hearing this news, Master Shui and Ling Yunfei's laughter stopped abruptly and their faces changed. Master Shui frowned and shouted with a sharp gaze, "What? Ji Tianqing dared to kill Gu Hao in front of everyone outside the medicine hall? This bastard, could it be that he was rejected by this old man and killed him on the street out of shame?" Master Shui's face was gloomy and his expression kept changing. He was weighing the consequences and troubles this matter could bring. Ling Yunfei also frowned and muttered with a face full of shock, "Ji Tianqing actually killed Gu Hao. How is this possible? He clearly became a trash at the third level of the body refinement realm. How could he beat Gu Hao, who is at the fifth level of the body refinement realm? How could he kill him with one palm?" Ling Yunfei's eyes became cold and she thought to herself, "No, I have to quickly discuss with the young prince and think of a way to get rid of Ji Tianqing. If I'm late, there might be more variables." Thus, Ling Yunfei and Master Shui exchanged some pleasantries and found an excuse to leave. After she left, Master Shui ordered the two guards in green, "You two, go and take care of Gu Hao's body. Also, send someone to the Gu clan to inform them. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. This matter has nothing to do with the medicine hall. The Gu clan will naturally find the Ji clan for an explanation." The two guards in green accepted the order and turned to leave the hall. Ji Tianqing's carriage returned to the Ji mansion. He and Huan just got off the carriage when a young servant came to inform him that the master was waiting for him in the study. "Father got the news that I killed Gu Hao so quickly?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and muttered in a low voice, "That's not right. Father must be looking for me for something else." Thus, he let Huan return to her room alone and went to the study in the main courtyard. Before Ji Tianqing entered the study room, he heard a violent coughing sound. He hurriedly stepped into the study and saw that only his father, Ji Chongkong, was there. Ji Chongkong sat on a rattan chair behind the desk. His face was yellow and his spirit was extremely haggard. There were a few strands of white hair in his black hair, which was particularly conspicuous. He covered his mouth with his handkerchief and tried to suppress the sound of his cough. His breathing also became much heavier. Ji Tianqing glanced at his father's handkerchief and saw that the white handkerchief was stained with blood. At this moment, Ji Chongkong saw him enter the study. He calmly put away the handkerchief and hid it in his sleeve. Ji Chongkong forced a smile and asked in a hoarse voice, "Tianqing, you're here. Is your body better?" Seeing his father's appearance, Ji Tianqing felt a little sad and said with a face full of worry, "Father, my body is fine now. You don't have to worry. But your body, have you seen a doctor?" Ji Chongkong waved his hand and said, "Tianqing, don't worry about me. It's just an old injury that has recurred. The doctor has seen it and it's fine." Ji Tianqing was silent, but his fists in his sleeves were secretly clenched. His heart was heavy. He knew very well that his father's internal organs had been injured ever since his battle with the sword sect master 10 years ago. After a divine doctor had seen him, they all said that there was no cure for this injury and could only be carefully nursed every day. Moreover, Ji Chongkong could no longer use his true essence. Otherwise, his lifespan would be reduced, and he might not live past 50 years old. In the past few years, Ji Chongkong's internal injuries had recurred several times. Every time, he was tormented to the point where he wished he was dead and aged a few years overnight. At this time, Ji Chongkong opened his mouth and interrupted Ji Tianqing's thoughts. With a serious expression, he said, "Tianqing, you were unconscious before, so I didn't have the chance to ask you. Later, I sent people to investigate. Before your accident, you went to Heaven Pavilion Mountain alone with Ling Yunfei. That night, you were unconscious and sent back to the residence by her. I always felt that there was something fishy about this matter. What happened between you and Ling Yunfei? Why did your cultivation dissipate overnight and drop to the third level of the body refinement realm? Tell me, is this Ling Yunfei's scheme? Did the Ling family cause you to become like this? As he spoke, Ji Changkong's face was as cold as ice. His eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent. Obviously, he had already seen through the strangeness and suspected that Ji Tianqing's crippling had something to do with the Ling family. As the head of the Ji family, one of the four great families, how could his thoughts and methods be compared to an ordinary person? Even if Ling Yunfei had a glib tongue and made up a lot of excuses to get rid of this matter, she couldn't escape his suspicion. After all, the Ji family was a family that had been passed down for nearly 100 years and was one of the four great pillars of the Qingyan kingdom. The Ji family's business was to forge weapons, and they controlled nearly half of the forging workshops in the Qingyan kingdom. Most of the millions of soldiers in the Qingyan kingdom used weapons forged by the Ji family. The divine weapons used by countless swordsmen and sword masters in the country were also made by the Ji family. The Ji family's wealth and power were enough to make the royal family wary. Ji Changkong controlled the huge Ji family and was able to defend their 100 years of foundation without declining. How could he be a mediocre person? Ji Tianqing had long expected that his father would suspect the Ling family. It was just that he hadn't found any evidence yet. Once his father got his hands on the evidence, he would definitely use all of the Ji family's wealth and power to take revenge on the Ling family. Because he was his father's most beloved son, the most proud genius of the Ji family. Ever since he was born, his mother had passed away. His father felt guilty in his heart, so he especially doted on him and devoted his life to nurturing and teaching him. Many times, Ji Tianqing felt that even if he killed the crown prince or the emperor one day, his father would not hesitate to rebel and go to war with the Qingyan kingdom for him. Now that his Dantian was destroyed and he had become a cripple, his father would definitely not let the Ling family go. Even if it was a life-and-death struggle, his father would not give up. But this was exactly what Ji Tianqing didn't want to see. In the past 10 years, the Ji family that was at the peak of its power had become the target of public criticism. Many forces tried to overthrow the Ji family, and even the royal family had some intentions of suppressing the Ji family. The Ji family was also full of contradictions. A few collateral descendants were eyeing the position of the family head covetously. Ji Changkong's health was deteriorating, and his control over the family was gradually declining. The Ji family's situation was getting more and more dangerous. The Ling family was an elixir family. Their wealth and power were on par with the Ji family. Under the management of Ling Yunfei and her father, the Ling family secretly colluded with the royal family. They also won over many forces and experts, causing the Ling family's power to grow bigger and bigger. Ji Tianqing saw all of this and remembered it in his heart. He could also guess that since Ling Yunfei dared to take off her disguise and attack him, she must be fearless. She might even have a stronger force behind her. Under such circumstances, if his father went to war with the Ling family in a rage, the Ji family would be the one to collapse in the end. Therefore, Ji Tianqing suppressed his anger and hatred and hid the matter of the god bead in his heart. He didn't want to tell his father. He wanted to avenge the Ling family with his own hands. He didn't want to drag the Ji family down with him. The pain and humiliation that Ling Yunfei inflicted on him, he wanted to return it with his own hands. Now that his father asked him, he hesitated for a moment and said calmly, "Father, I have my own plans for this matter. Please don't ask anymore. The most important thing right now is for you to calm down and recuperate. If you fall, the Ji family will be a pile of loose sand and can only be trampled on." Tianqing, you sigh. Ji Changkong was anxious and angry. However, Ji Tianqing didn't want to say anything. He could only swallow the words that were about to come out of his mouth. In the end, he could only sigh. Tianqing, you are a young genius. You originally had boundless glory. Now that you have suffered such a blow and calamity, you didn't give up on yourself. You can still remain calm and rational. Father is very gratified. Father also believes that there is always a way out. You will definitely rise again. Chapter 9. Ji Tianqing had his own plans regarding the Ling family, so Ji Changkong didn't say anything else. Then Ji Tianqing said with a serious expression, Father, I also have something to report to you. I went to the spirit medicine hall just now, but I didn't see Master Shui. Instead, I met the Gu family's third young master, Gu Hao. He molested Huan in front of everyone, so I attacked him in anger. I wanted to teach him a lesson, but I didn't expect to kill him with one palm. Ji Tianqing briefly explained how he had killed Gu Hao with a single palm strike. Ji Chongkong's expression changed slightly as he raised his eyebrows and said in a serious tone, Gu Hao is the third son of Yunzhou's provincial governor, Gu Shiji. Although this child is unbearably stubborn and is not valued by Gu Shiji, but Gu Hao is still his own flesh and blood. This matter concerns the Gu family's reputation, so it is indeed a little troublesome. However, it is only a little troublesome. Pausing, he calmly said to Ji Tianqing, Tianqing, father will take care of this matter. You don't need to do anything, just focus on recuperating. It's just a mere Gu family. Although they have a lot of power, Gu Shiji doesn't have the guts to start a war with my Ji family. Ji Chongkong's words were filled with toughness and dominance. His protection and love for Ji Tianqing was also evident. Father, thank you for your trouble. Ji Tianqing bowed, then excused himself and left the study. When Ji Tianqing left and only Ji Chongkong was left in the study, he revealed an astonished expression. The corner of his mouth hooked into a playful smile. That Gu Hao is said to have the strength of the 5th level of the body refinement realm. Tianqing is only at the 3rd level of the body refinement realm, but he was able to kill Gu Hao with one palm. Haha, my son is indeed a martial arts genius. He didn't disappoint me. It seems that even if he falls to the body refinement realm, he will rise again sooner or later. Thinking of this, Ji Chongkong's mood eased a lot. The dark clouds that had accumulated in his heart over the past few days also dissipated. When Ji Tianqing returned to his residence, he saw Huan sitting in the room in a daze with tear stains on her charming face. He smiled and comforted Huan with a few words. Silly girl, what are you thinking about? That Gu Hao is just the 3rd young master of the Gu family. If he is killed, then so be it. Why can't our Ji family settle such a small matter? Moreover, Gu Hao is a hedonistic playboy. Who knows how many innocent women he has harmed over the years and how many innocent people he has secretly killed. He deserves to die. With Ji Tianqing by her side, Huan had a backbone. After Ji Tianqing comforted her, she quickly calmed down and wiped away her tears. Huan, go and rest. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion. After Huan left the room, Ji Tianqing opened a secret passage in the corner and entered the secret room to cultivate. The secret room was dimly lit. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the elemental gathering array and began to cultivate the Tao of the heart of the sword. Now, the Ji clan had to add the Gu clan to their list of enemies. The situation was getting more and more dangerous. Ji Tianqing only wanted to cultivate the 12 strands of sword qi as soon as possible. He wanted to condense the sword embryo in his body and increase his strength as soon as possible. In this world where martial arts were respected, only powerful martial arts could protect himself, his father, and the Ji clan. However, when Ji Tianqing sensed the 2 strands of sword qi in his body, his expression changed. He revealed a look of deep surprise. I condensed 2 strands of sword qi last night. Why is there only 1 strand left? Last night, he had diligently cultivated for an entire night and only managed to condense 2 strands of sword qi. 1 strand was stored in the Huizong acupoint on his right arm and the other in the Yangqi acupoint on the back of his hand. But now, the sword qi in the Huizong acupoint was still there, but the sword qi in the Yangqi acupoint was gone. Ji Tianqing was both depressed and puzzled. He frowned and thought for a long time. Suddenly, he recalled the scene after Gu Hao was killed and blood appeared on his chest. At that time, I only slapped Gu Hao once. There was a wound on his left chest. Obviously, he died because his heart was injured. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's eyes suddenly lit up. He instantly guessed the reason. I understand now. It must be that strand of sword qi that killed Gu Hao. No wonder he was slapped to death by me. So that's why. I didn't think that the sword qi that I condensed would have such a strong power. Ji Tianqing was enlightened, and his mood became excited. Only with the strength of the true element realm would one be able to release the true essence from their body and increase the power of their attacks. I didn't think that with only the strength of the 3rd level of the body refinement realm, I would be able to use sword qi to kill people. The Tao of the sword heart is indeed marvelous and too strong. Right now I'm only condensing sword qi. When I successfully condense the sword embryo, How strong would its power be? I'm afraid it wouldn't be much different from the true element realm, right? Ji Tianqing could faintly feel that although the Tao of the sword heart that he cultivated seemed to be an unorthodox path, it had a power that orthodox martial arts could not match. After a long while, his mood calmed down, and he began to concentrate on cultivating, continuing to condense sword qi. With the previous experience of condensing sword qi, now that he was cultivating sword qi again, his speed was slightly faster. He cultivated continuously for a day and a night, and actually successfully condensed 5 strands of sword qi. Including the sword qi in his Huizong acupuncture point, he already had 6 strands of sword qi. He had already completed half of the 12 strands of sword qi required to condense the sword embryo. Ji Tianqing's spirit was aroused, and he originally wanted to continue cultivating. But he had cultivated continuously for 24 hours and had used up too much of his energy. He was already famished and had no choice but to end his cultivation. Currently, he was only at the body refinement realm and was still far from the realm where martial artists did not need to eat. Furthermore, body refinement realm martial artists originally needed to consume large amounts of meat and tonics daily to replenish their blood and qi and convert it into essence qi to temper their body and raise their strength. When Ji Tianqing left the secret room and returned to his room, the sun was rising from the east and the sun was shining brightly in the morning. He let Huan bring over a lot of food from the kitchen and had breakfast in his room. Huan brought out 9 plates of delicious delicacies from the food box and a bowl of light green rice which filled the entire table. Ji Tianqing glanced at the dishes and rice on the table and could not help but reveal a smile. Fire beef, spiritual mutton, mystic tiger meat, spiritual herb roasted chicken. All of them are first-ranked demonic beast ingredients, and there's also a bowl of rice made from spiritual rice. This meal cost at least 10,000 taels of silver. It's even better than my meals in the past. Father really put a lot of thought into this. Huan nodded her head worriedly. That's right. Ever since young master got into trouble, old master not only did not reduce your monthly allowance, he even doubled it. The elders of the other halls are very dissatisfied with old master's methods. Last night they even quarreled with old master in the main hall because of the Gu clan. While eating, Ji Tianqing sneered without raising his head. Hee, my uncles have always been suppressed by my father, and their children have also been suppressed by me to the point that they can't breathe. Now that something has happened to me, they are relieved and can finally hold their heads high. Huan pursed her lips and continued. Eldest young master, yesterday people from the Gu clan came to the residence and caused a ruckus. They threatened to make you pay with your life, but old master temporarily suppressed this matter. Today, the Gu clan found the help of 2 other aristocratic families and joined forces to pressure old master. Today, old master went to negotiate with them. The 3 elders of the residence not only did not help old master resolve this matter, but they also secretly rejoiced in others' misfortune. They discussed handing you over to the Gu clan to be dealt with, so that the Ji clan would not be implicated. Ji Tianqing continued to eat without changing his expression. It was obvious that he had already expected the reaction of his 3 uncles. He was not surprised or angry at all. Chapter 10. After eating breakfast, Ji Tianqing's physical strength was replenished and his mental state was much better. While Huanber was busy cleaning up, he walked out of his room and rushed to the martial arts hall to test his current strength. After all, he had already cultivated 6 flashes of sword energy and felt that his strength had increased by quite a bit. He really wanted to know if cultivating the Tao of the sword could increase his strength, and by how much. The Ji mansion was very large, covering an area of more than 1,000 mu. There were 7 courtyards in total, and over 1,000 people in the mansion. From Ji Tianqing's cool breeze courtyard to the second courtyard's martial arts hall, he had to pass through 2 courtyards and walk for half a quarter of an hour. Along the way, Ji Tianqing met many servants and maids, as well as a few distant relatives and branch descendants of the Ji family. Although his cultivation had been crippled and he had become the laughingstock of the imperial city, this matter was already known to everyone. However, he was still the young master of the Ji family. Those servants, maids, and branch descendants had a relatively low status in the mansion and still did not dare to be disrespectful to him. Even though some of the branch descendants were secretly rejoicing in Ji Tianqing's misfortune, they still had to respectfully bow in front of him, not daring to overstep their boundaries. Half a quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianqing arrived at the second courtyard. Outside the martial arts hall, there was a square with a radius of 1,000 zhang. The ordinary descendants of the Ji family would usually practice martial arts here. Ji Tianqing was the most respected young master, and also the heir to the family head position. Naturally, he would not mix in with the ordinary descendants to practice martial arts. He had a training room specially built for him by the Ji mansion and enjoyed the best treatment and cultivation resources. When he stepped into the square, there were more than a dozen Ji family descendants practicing their swords. For a long time, the gap between Ji Tianqing and these young boys and girls was too big. They could only look up to him from afar and regard him as their idol. Ji Tianqing would occasionally come to the martial arts hall, and these young boys and girls would scramble to curry favor with him. If anyone could receive a word of praise and encouragement from him, they would be able to show off in front of others for several months. But now, when Ji Tianqing crossed the square and walked towards the martial arts hall, those young boys and girls stood in the distance and looked at him with complicated expressions. No one came up to him, and there were no more respectful or excited faces. Only whispers and low laughter could be heard. Ji Tianqing ignored them and did not get angry. He stepped into the martial arts hall expressionlessly. Only mediocre people would be afraid of losing their dignity and reputation. Only mediocre people would care about the schadenfreude and ridicule of the weak. Ji Tianqing didn't care. Even if his strength had fallen to the body refinement realm, he still had a tenacious and indomitable heart. In his eyes, the young men and women in the square were still weak and not worth mentioning. After entering the main hall of the drill hall, Ji Tianqing went straight to a high platform in the corner. On the 3-meter-tall stone platform, there was a black stone pillar engraved with veined patterns. It was the psychic stone used to test a martial artist's strength. Ji Tianqing walked up to the high platform and stared at the psychic stone pillar with anticipation in his eyes. After taking a deep breath, he stretched out his hands and pressed them on the psychic stone pillar. The black veined patterns on the stone pillar reacted, and a few of the veined patterns lit up with a faint white light. The white light represented the strength of the body refinement realm, and the number of veined patterns represented the specific level. Ji Tianqing counted in his heart, 1, 2, 3, 6 veined patterns. 6th level of the body refinement realm. This result made him raise his eyebrows. His eyes revealed a deep smile, and his heartbeat also doubled. I've only cultivated the sword heart Dao for 2 days, and I actually went from the 3rd level of the body refinement realm to the 6th level. Thinking back, I used a year to go from the 3rd level of the body refinement realm to the 6th level. I could already be considered a genius. Other Ji clan disciples would need at least 2 years, or even 3 years. Although I'm cultivating from the beginning, my recovery speed should be very fast. But to rise by 3 levels in 2 days, isn't this too terrifying? The wonders of the sword heart Dao made Ji Tianqing excited. His hands couldn't help but tremble. A thought immediately appeared in his mind. At this speed, before the large competition next month, I will most likely be able to return to the true element realm. There's hope for revenge. After calming down, Ji Tianqing quickly withdrew his hands. The veined patterns on the psychic stone pillar also dimmed. He swept a glance around the main hall. Seeing that there was no one else around, he relaxed. The sword heart Dao was his biggest secret. He didn't want anyone to know about it for now. His strength was quickly recovering. After a while, Ji Tianqing walked out of the main hall. Under the gaze of many Ji clan disciples, he left the martial arts hall. Although the Gu clan's matters are troublesome, with father's methods, it shouldn't be long before things settle down. I only have 1 month left. I must work hard on cultivating the sword heart Dao and quickly recover my strength. Ji Tianqing silently calculated. He prepared to return to his residence and continue his closed-door cultivation. However, just as he was passing through the 3rd courtyard, he encountered a young man wearing a green robe and holding a dark gold sword. The youth's age was similar to Ji Tianqing. His face was handsome and fair, and his figure was tall and straight. He had the temperament of a heroic, noble young master. When he saw Ji Tianqing walking towards him, he immediately revealed a gentle smile and quickly walked forward. "Big brother, I was just about to look for you. I didn't expect to meet you here." Ji Tianqing stopped and raised his eyebrows. With a calm expression, he said, "Ji Hao? Why are you looking for me?" Ji Hao was the son of the Ji clan's 2nd elder. The 2nd elder was Ji Tianqing's 2nd uncle. Ji Hao was his younger cousin. Ji Hao was 1 year younger than Ji Tianqing. His talent was also considered good. His strength had reached the 9th level of the body refinement realm, and he had hopes of entering the true element realm this year. In the past few years, Ji Hao and Ji Tianqing had been very close. He had always followed Ji Tianqing's lead and was very respectful to him. Among the younger generation of the Ji clan, only Ji Hao was the closest to him. At this time, Ji Hao walked in front of him and said in a concerned tone, "Big brother, ever since your accident, I have been very worried. You were unconscious before, so I didn't disturb you. Now that I know you are fine, I was about to go visit you." Ever since Ji Tianqing's accident, no matter if it was the Ji clan or the young masters of the imperial city, they all had a gloating and mocking expression on their faces. Ji Tianqing thought that Ji Hao's attitude would change, but he didn't expect Ji Hao to be the same as before. He was very sincere and concerned about him. This made Ji Tianqing's heart feel warm. He nodded to Ji Hao and said, "Second brother, thank you for your concern. I am fine now. And I believe that big brother will definitely return to the peak." Ji Hao smiled. As if he suddenly thought of something, he suddenly looked like he wanted to say something but stopped. Ji Tianqing saw his strange expression and asked, "What is it, second brother? Is there anything else?" Ji Hao hesitated for a moment, then revealed a bitter smile and said, "Big brother, I didn't want to tell you. After all, it is a troublesome matter. But uncle is not in the house, so I can only ask you for advice." "What is it?" Ji Tianqing narrowed his eyes, a bad premonition in his heart. Ji Hao answered truthfully, "Big brother, the matter is like this. Last night, the Xian Sword Workshop in the southern suburbs sent back a message saying that a batch of goods was returned. The price is over 2 million silver." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, his eyes revealing a hint of surprise and anger. The Xian Sword Workshop was actually returned. The Xian Sword Workshop in the southern suburbs was one of the 4 high-level forging workshops of the Ji clan. It specialized in forging Xian-level weapons. Xian-level weapons were very expensive. A Xian-level low-level sword could be sold for 30,000 silver. A Xian-level middle-level sword could be sold for 70 to 80,000 silver. Furthermore, the profits of Xian-level weapons were the most considerable. A Xian-level sword worth 2 million silver could bring the Ji clan at least 600,000 silver. Half of the Ji clan's wealth was accumulated by the 4 Xian sword workshops. All this time, the Xian Sword Workshop in the southern suburbs was personally managed by Ji Chongkong. In the past, when Ji Tianqing was busy with work and couldn't leave, Ji Tianqing would also share his father's worries and often go to the Xian Sword Workshop in the southern suburbs to supervise. Now that the Xian Sword Workshop in the southern suburbs had an accident, Ji Tianqing's heart also rose. Brothers, please collect it. Please support it with your recommendation tickets. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 11. The Ji family was the #1 blacksmithing family in the Qingyun kingdom. They were the authority in the world of blacksmithing and were well known in the neighboring countries. For so many years, the black-grade swords forged by the Ji family had always been praised and sought after by various experts. There had never been a problem. Things like returning the goods were very rare. This was the first time something worth 2 million taels of silver had been returned. Ji Tianqing asked Ji Hao with a gloomy face, "Second brother, what is going on? Who dares to return our goods?" "It's the Gu family." Ji Hao's face was full of anger as he said with righteous indignation, "The Gu family ordered 50 black-grade swords from the Xian Sword Workshop last month, and the agreed price was 2,230,000. Yesterday was supposed to be the delivery day. The workshop in the southern suburbs informed the Gu family to collect the goods. Who would have thought that the Gu family wanted to return the goods and even wanted a deposit of 100,000 taels?" Ji Tianqing immediately understood that the reason the Gu family wanted to return the goods must be because of Gu Hao's death. He couldn't help but sneer. If the Gu family wants to return the goods, then let them return it. They can forget about getting the deposit back. The black-grade swords forged by our Ji family are famous in the Qingyun kingdom, and we have never lacked buyers. Even if the Gu family doesn't want to buy them, there are plenty of people who want to buy them. Ji Hao frowned and said worriedly, "But big brother, this has never happened before. If we really let the Gu family return the goods, then when the news gets out, who knows what people will say. There will definitely be people who will slander our swords. Big brother, I think you should go and take a look." This matter concerns our Ji family's reputation. Ji Tianqing pondered for a moment and nodded. All right, then I will go personally. After saying that, he turned and walked out of the courtyard and asked the servants to prepare the horses. Ji Hao quickly followed. Big brother, I will go with you. After a while, Ji Tianqing and Ji Hao left the Ji residence and rode to the Xian sword workshop in the southern suburbs. The workshop was located on a mountain in the southern suburbs and was more than 60 miles away from the imperial city. Rather than calling it a workshop, it was more like the Ji family's manor, which took up half of the mountain. The Ji clan had hollowed out the interior of the mountain and built several large warehouses to store the materials and ores used for forging. In the belly of the mountain, there was also an enormous furnace. When the fire in the furnace was ignited, the sky would be dyed red, and even the clouds would be dyed crimson. There were more than 2,000 workers and blacksmithing apprentices in the workshop, as well as more than a dozen blacksmithing masters who worked day and night for the Ji family. Other than that, there were also more than 300 guards guarding the mysterious sword workshop. Among them, there were many experts and a few experts. Anyone who saw the mysterious sword workshop in the southern suburbs with their own eyes would be amazed by its grand scale and imposing manner. Ji Tianqing and Ji Hao took more than 2 hours to reach the mysterious sword workshop in the southern suburbs. After entering the workshop, Ji Tianqing went straight to the workshop owner, Gu Jian, to ask about the details. Gu Jian was Ji Tianqing's confidant, and he was also very familiar with Ji Tianqing. He treated Ji Tianqing with trust and passion like a nephew. He already knew that Ji Tianqing had become a cripple, so when he saw Ji Tianqing, he asked a few questions out of concern. After some small talk, Gu Jian said with a serious expression, "Eldest young master, I personally supervised the forging of these swords. There are absolutely no problems. The Gu clan is also unreasonable in their return. Right now, the elders and guards of the Gu clan are still sitting in the reception hall. What do you think?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a cold tone, "If that's the case, let them return the goods if they want to. Deduct the deposit. From now on, the Ji clan will never sell another weapon to the Gu clan. As for the 50 swords, we will find another buyer." "Humph, do you think the swords made by the Ji clan can't be sold?" Gu Jian originally had the same idea, but this was a serious matter. Only the clan master, Ji Chongkong, or the eldest young master personally said so could he carry out this plan. Seeing that Ji Tianqing agreed, Gu Jian cupped his hands and accepted the order. He then went to negotiate with the Gu clan. After dealing with this matter, Ji Tianqing left the workshop with Ji Hao. When the two went down the mountain, it was close to noon. There was no one on the official road at the foot of the mountain. Only the two of them were galloping. An hour later, the two of them were riding through a lush green forest. Ji Tianqing suddenly realized that there were several horse-tripping ropes in front of him on the official road about 30 meters away, blocking his path. "Nay!" Ji Tianqing hurriedly pulled on the reins, wanting to stop the galloping white horse. The white horse let out a neigh and galloped for another 7 to 8 meters before stopping in front of the tripwires. Ji Hao's horse also stopped beside him. It even raised its front hooves high, almost knocking Ji Hao off his horse. "Second brother, be careful. There might be an ambush here," Ji Tianqing reminded Ji Hao in a low voice. He gripped the black level upper-grade treasure sword at his waist, the Blood Dragon sword. Ji Hao immediately understood, and also pulled out his black gold treasure sword with a clang. He looked around vigilantly. At this moment, from the dense forest on both sides of the official road, there was suddenly a clatter sound. In the next moment, 6 martial artists wearing tight black clothes and masks rushed out as fast as the wind. They waved their swords and rushed towards the two of them. "Kill!" The 6 martial artists rushed over with murderous intent. Their movements were very vigorous and fast. In the blink of an eye, they were in front of Ji Tianqing and Ji Hao. Although Ji Tianqing's strength had fallen to the body refinement realm, his martial arts experience was still there. His eyes were still sharp. Just by looking at the movements and speed of the 6 martial artists, he could tell that their strength was not ordinary. They were probably at the 8th level of body refinement realm. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 6 martial artists waved their swords at the same time and slashed at Ji Tianqing and Ji Hao. 4 of the martial artists surrounded Ji Tianqing, and only 2 attacked Ji Hao. Seeing the swords and sabers coming in front of him, Ji Tianqing subconsciously pulled out his Blood Dragon sword and swept it out. Clang, clang, clang. The 4 swords and sabers were all knocked away by the blood dragon's sword. Ji Tianqing dodged the attack, but he was also knocked off his horse by the power of the 4 people. The web between his thumb and index finger was bleeding, and his right arm was numb. He could not use any strength. Kill! The 4 martial artists angrily roared and waved their swords and sabers at him. In a moment of desperation, Ji Tianqing rolled a few times on the ground and rolled to the side of the road. Although his face was covered in dirt, he successfully dodged the 4 swords and sabers and kept his life. Seeing the 4 warriors pouncing on him like ferocious tigers, he leaped and was about to jump into the forest. At this critical juncture, a long sword suddenly appeared from the side and viciously stabbed towards his chest. Ji Tianqing glanced at the sword from the corner of his eyes and found that the person who attacked him was one of the 2 martial artists surrounding Ji Hao. He instantly understood that the target of the 6 masked assassins was him. Brothers, my new book is updated 3 times a day. I beg everyone to vote for me. Chapter 12. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing was about to be stabbed by the sword. Ji Hao suddenly shouted angrily and rushed over anxiously with his sword. Big brother, be careful. His figure flashed and rushed to Ji Tianqing's side. He waved his sword and knocked away the sword. Ji Tianqing was lucky enough to escape and successfully jumped into the forest. Ji Hao helped him block the sword and was immediately surrounded by several masked assassins. He waved his sword to block the attack of the masked assassins and did not forget to urge, Big brother, these assassins are coming for you. Run quickly, I will hold them back. As soon as his voice fell, his left arm was stabbed and blood immediately dyed his blue clothes red. Ji Tianqing saw that he was surrounded by several assassins and was in a very dangerous situation. He did not want to leave him alone to escape. But Ji Hao was stronger than him. If he stayed, he would only be a burden to Ji Hao. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianqing made a prompt decision and immediately turned around to escape. He ran wildly into the forest. His body was as agile as a lynx. He shuttled through the dense forest and was not much slower than on flat ground. 2 assassins entangled Ji Hao. The other 4 rushed into the forest and chased after him with all their strength. The dense forest was full of thorns and weeds. Ji Tianqing had many wounds on his body and blood dyed his clothes red. But he did not have time to pay attention to it. He could only desperately run away. But the 4 assassins were stronger and faster than him. It did not take long for them to catch up with him. Ji Tianqing saw that there was a cliff in front of him. He had no choice but to escape to the top of the mountain. After about 10 breaths of time, he escaped to an open space on the top of the mountain. The open space was more than 100 feet wide. The ground was covered with a thick layer of leaves and was surrounded by dense forest. The 4 assassins also caught up. They spread out and surrounded the open space. Little brat, keep running? Humph, let's see where you can run to now. Prepare to die. Kneel down and beg for mercy. I will give you a quick death. The assassins sneered mockingly, like a cat playing with a mouse. Ji Tianqing had nowhere to run. A trace of despair welled up in his heart, and his expression was extremely unsightly. However, he refused to give up struggling. He would rather fight to the death than beg for mercy. He gripped the blood dragon sword and stared coldly at the masked assassins. He roared, "Who sent you to kill me? Hee hee, you'll know when you die." The leader of the masked assassins sneered and swung his saber at Ji Tianqing's neck. Ji Tianqing hurriedly waved his sword to block, but he was forced back a few steps by the saber. The blood dragon's sword in his hand almost flew out of his hand. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the other 3 assassins brandished their swords and attacked him, leaving a few deep sword wounds on his body. On his back and thigh, there was a chopstick-length wound. Blood was gushing out of the wound, dyeing his white robe red. Ji Tianqing's face turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Cold sweat broke out all over his body. He resisted the severe pain and didn't fall down. As long as the 4 assassins attacked him 2 more times, he would die on the spot. There was no chance of survival. However, just as the assassins were about to attack again and take his life, a crisp and melodious bird's cry suddenly sounded above everyone's heads. The bird's cry sounded above the mountain peak, and Ji Tianqing could tell that it was definitely not the cry of an ordinary bird. The next moment, a huge object flew above everyone's heads and covered the scorching sun in the sky. The empty space within a radius of more than 100 feet, as well as Ji Tianqing and the 4 masked assassins, were all covered by the shadow. Everyone stopped attacking and looked up at the sky subconsciously. They saw a huge white bird that was as big as a house. It was 100 meters above the ground in the sky, looking down at them from above. The huge bird was snow white, and only its tail feathers were black. There was a crimson crest on its head, and its appearance was almost the same as a white crane. However, Ji Tianqing had never seen such a huge white crane before. The white crane's body was as big as a house, and its pure white wings were as wide as 30 meters when they spread out. He suddenly remembered that he had seen an introduction of this huge bird in a book. This is a spirit crane? It's very likely to be the spirit beast white crane mentioned in the book. Most of the beasts that lived in the mountains and rivers were ferocious beasts and demonic beasts. Even if they were captured, they were difficult to tame. However, spirit beasts were different. They all had spirituality, were human-like, and could be tamed. Ji Tianqing heard that the royal family of the Azure Cloud Kingdom raised a few spirit beasts, and it was said that the Sky Pillar sect also had many powerful spirit beasts. However, these were only what he had heard. Now that he had seen the legendary spirit crane with his own eyes, it was naturally an eye-opener, and his heart was incomparably shocked. At this moment, he suddenly saw that there was a person standing on the broad back of the white spirit crane. Ji Tianqing was even more shocked. After careful observation, he realized that it was a graceful figure, and a peerless beauty dressed in snow-white clothes. The young girl was about 17 or 18 years old. She wore a long white dress, had a tall figure, and had long black hair that hung down to her waist. She held a sword and a black scabbard in her hand. She stood on the back of the spirit crane with an indifferent expression, looking down at the crowd from above. The strong wind in the sky blew her clothes and long hair, causing her clothes to flutter and her temperament to be otherworldly, as if she was an otherworldly fairy. Ji Tianqing stared at her, revealing a stunned expression, and his heartbeat quickened. He was certain that even if he were to search the entire Qingyun kingdom, he would not be able to find a beauty like her. Her skin was as white as snow, and she was as beautiful as autumn waters. Such a graceful fairy in white shouldn't exist in the mortal world. She should be in the celestial palace above the 9 heavens. At the same time, the 4 dumbfounded assassins regained their senses and retracted their astonished gazes. They did not forget the mission on their shoulders. Once again, they shouted angrily and brandished their swords to kill Ji Tianqing. Kill! Go to hell! Saber light and sword shadows flashed, and the open space on the mountain peak was overflowing with killing intent. Ji Tianqing endured his injuries and hurriedly brandished his sword to block. However, the peerless beauty on the spirit crane's back suddenly drew her sword. Clang! The moment the sword was unsheathed, the blade emitted a biting cold light, like a pool of autumn water. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The peerless beauty brandished her sword, and 4 3-foot-long sword rays descended from the sky, piercing towards the 4 masked assassins. In just a moment, the 4 sword rays pierced through the heads of the 4 assassins at the same time. The assassins froze on the spot. Their hands holding their swords were still in midair, but blood spurted out from their heads. In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them died at the same time. Their corpses fell to the ground and lay in the thick layer of fallen leaves, no longer moving. Ji Tianqing was also stunned. He stared dumbfounded at the 4 assassins' corpses, and his heart was in turmoil. She only swung her sword casually, but she was able to instantly kill 4 assassins from 100 meters high in the air with her sword aura? What realm has her strength reached? Chapter 13. Ji Tianqing knew very well that the Lady in White's strength was far beyond the true energy realm. Although a martial artist at LV7 of the true energy realm could release his true energy as an attack, the limit of his true energy was 3 meters away from his body. Only an expert at the Tongxian realm could condense his true energy into a sword ray and kill someone within 30 meters. For the white-clothed beauty to be able to kill an enemy 100 meters away with a single strike, she was definitely an expert of Tongxian stage 7 or above. After all, his father, Ji Chongkong, was an expert at LV6 of the Tongxian realm, but he was definitely not as powerful as the Lady in White. Just as Ji Tianqing was shocked and secretly analyzing the situation, a muffled sound suddenly came from the forest behind him. Bang! 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 Every dull sound was like a drumstick, shaking Ji Tianqing's heart. He felt the ground tremble with the dull sound. The branches and leaves of the nearby forest swayed and parted to the sides. From the looks of it, it was as if a powerful, ferocious beast was charging out of the forest. Ji Tianqing was alert and subconsciously held the blood dragon's sword tightly. The next moment, a huge black shadow rushed out of the forest and headed straight for the open space on the mountain peak. When Ji Tianqing saw the black shadow clearly, his pupils constricted and his hair stood on end. It was a giant beast that looked like a brown bear. Its body was as big as a house, and it was more than 3 meters tall. The giant beast's fur was crimson red, and there were faint sparks of fire. A pair of fist-sized brown eyes flashed with a chilling light that made one's heart palpitate. Ji Tianqing had no doubt that this bear-shaped giant beast was a high-level demonic beast. It could smash a city wall with one slap, and was extremely powerful. What shocked him even more was that there was a saddle-like fur cushion on the back of the giant beast. A young man in black was sitting on it with a fiery red sword on his back. The young man was in his early 20s, and he was as tall as an iron tower. His bare arms were as thick as a tree. The muscles on his arms were knotted, and his skin was bronze. His entire body exuded a fierce aura. The bear-shaped gigantic beast rushed into the open space and stopped about 30 meters away from Ji Tianqing. The burly young man looked at Ji Tianqing condescendingly and glanced at the killer's corpse on the ground. A playful smile appeared on his face. At this time, another giant beast rushed out of the forest and stopped beside the bear. This beast was a giant silver wolf. It wasn't as big as the bear, and its footsteps weren't as heavy and frightening. The giant wolf's fur shone with a silver light. It was about 3 meters long and as tall as a person. Its entire body emitted a cold air. On the back of the silver wolf sat a young man in a white robe. However, this young man was tall and thin, and his face was sickly pale. He looked very gentle and weak, like a sickly rich young master. Of course, Ji Tianqing did not dare to underestimate the silver wolf he was riding. The burly young man and the thin young man were obviously companions and had a close relationship with each other. Seeing the thin young man panting with a pale face, the burly young man grinned and said, "Hee hee, senior brother Bai, you always say that your silver moon wolf is as fast as the wind. Why is it getting slower and slower along the way? It's not as fast as my red flame violent bear?" Senior brother Bai wiped his mouth with a white handkerchief and said with a smile, "Junior brother How, my silver moon wolf is only fast when it's killing. It's not like your red flame violent bear, which is violent and patient. It can run for nearly 10,000 miles and even cross mountains to open a path in front." The burly young man, junior brother Hao, grinned proudly. He pointed to the top of his head and said with a face full of envy, "But senior brother Bai, no matter how fast we are, we're still running on the ground. We're not as cool as senior sister, flying in the sky on a spirit crane." Senior brother Bai nodded and still had a smile on his face. When he looked at the beauty in white on the back of the spirit crane, his eyes contained a touch of imperceptible gentleness. At this time, junior brother Hao pointed to the 4 corpses on the ground and said to senior brother Bai, "Senior brother Bai, we're a step late. Senior sister just acted chivalrously and killed a few masked thieves." Senior brother Bai said with a smile, "Senior sister is cold on the outside but warm on the inside. She's kind-hearted and benevolent. This is something we all know." "Well, that's true." Junior brother Hao nodded and then looked at Ji Tianqing. He said with a meaningful smile, "Boy, our senior sister Yunyao's identity is very noble. You can actually get her to save you personally. This is your good fortune from your previous life." Senior brother Bai just glanced at Ji Tianqing and then looked up at the beauty in white in the sky. He didn't put Ji Tianqing in his eyes at all. The beauty in white on the back of the spirit crane still had a calm face. She said in an indifferent tone, "Junior brothers, don't forget that we have important things to do on this trip. Don't delay our business." Junior brother Hao immediately restrained his smile and said seriously, "Senior sister, we're just resting for a while. We'll continue our journey now." After that, he rode the fiery red bear and passed by Ji Tianqing. Senior brother Bai also rode the silver moon wolf and followed. The two crossed the open space on the top of the mountain and continued to rush to the north. Ji Tianqing's thoughts were tumbling in his mind. He vaguely guessed something, but he didn't show it on the surface. Seeing that the spirit crane in the sky was also about to leave, he quickly cupped his hands and thanked the beauty in white. "Thank you for saving me. Mississippi." Ji Tianqing will remember this kindness and will never forget it for the rest of his life. "You don't have to be so polite. It's just a small matter." The beautiful woman in white replied indifferently before flying away on her spirit crane. After a few breaths, the spirit crane disappeared into the sky. The figures of the fiery red bear and the silver moon wolf also disappeared into the forest. Ji Tianqing was the only one left in the open space. The surroundings fell silent. The three of them are young but have unfathomable strength. They're even riding on spirit beasts. From the way they address themselves, they should be disciples of the sect. Listening to their conversation, they seem to be shouldering an important mission. The direction they're traveling in seems to be towards the Qingyun imperial city. Yunyao? Yunyao. Ji Tianqing muttered the name of the beauty in white several times in his heart. He felt that the name was a little familiar, as if he had heard it before. All of a sudden, an idea flashed through his mind, and his eyes shone brightly. Yunyao. It's actually her? The chief disciple of the Sky Pillar sect. She's the #1 prodigy who's famous in the Tianshan region and easily crushed the geniuses of the 10 nations with the Autumn Water Sword. Ji Tianqing finally came to a realization. No wonder the beauty in white was like a fairy in the heavens and had such superb attainments in the Sword Dao. After he calmed down, he immediately thought of another question. Sky Pillar sect disciples. What are they doing in the Qingyun imperial city? After a long time, Ji Tianqing came back to his senses and remembered that Ji Hao was still being harassed by the 2 assassins. Hence, he quickly left the mountain peak and rushed to the official road at the foot of the mountain. After 15 minutes, when he returned to the official road at the foot of the mountain, he realized that Ji Hao and the 2 assassins were gone. Even the white horse that he and Ji Hao were riding on was nowhere to be seen. There were a few drops of blood on the ground and a torn piece of sleeve. Ji Tianqing recognized at a glance that the piece of green cloth belonged to Ji Hao. I wonder how second brother is doing. Did he escape? He was a little worried, but there was nothing he could do. After weighing the pros and cons, he rushed back to the imperial city. Chapter 14. When Ji Tianqing rushed back to the Ji mansion, it was already afternoon. He was covered in blood and dust, drenched in sweat as he rushed into the Ji mansion. He grabbed the guard at the gate and asked about Ji Hao's whereabouts. Is Ji Hao back yet? The guard saw that he was covered in injuries, but didn't dare to ask. He quickly answered, Eldest young master Hao just came back not long ago. He's also injured, but his injuries don't seem serious. Ji Tianqing was relieved and finally let out a sigh of relief. It's good that he's fine. He ignored the guard's concerned questions and hurried back to the cool breeze courtyard. When he returned to his room, Huan saw that he was covered in blood and dust. She was so worried that her eyes turned red. Eldest young master, how did you get hurt? What happened? How did you get hurt so badly? Huan don't worry, I'm fine. Go get the medicine box. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and forced a smile. Huan quickly brought the medicine box, a basin of water and a towel, and helped Ji Tianqing clean and bandage his wounds. An hour later, Huan finished bandaging Ji Tianqing's wound and applied some medicine on it. Ji Tianqing changed his bloodstained clothes and closed the door. He said with a serious face, Huan I went to the Xian sword workshop in the southern suburbs today. On the way back, I was ambushed by several masked assassins. After hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Huan was shocked and angry. Despicable assassins. They deserve to die. Young master, you are the eldest young master of the Ji family. Who would have the guts to assassinate you in broad daylight? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a gloomy face, The people who want my life the most should be the Ling family and the Gu family. However, I made a last-minute decision to go to the Xian sword workshop. Only a few people know about it. But those assassins had already set up an ambush, as if they already knew that I would go. So, it shouldn't be the Ling family. They wouldn't need to go through so much trouble to ambush me in the southern suburbs. As for the Gu family, it's very likely that they're involved. However, I suspect that there is a mole in the Ji mansion. Someone deliberately leaked my whereabouts to kill me. At this point, Ji Tianqing had a trace of suspicion towards Ji Hao in his heart. However, Ji Hao had blocked a sword for him. Moreover, he and Ji Hao had a good relationship since they were young. He did not believe that Ji Hao would want to harm him. Huan pretty face was full of worry, and she asked tentatively, Eldest young master, why don't I report this to master? Master will definitely send someone to investigate clearly. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, Father is worried about the Gu family's matters, so let's not tell him for now. I have my own plans. This. Huaner hesitated. She instinctively felt that this was inappropriate. At this moment, the door was pushed open by someone with a creak. Ji Tianqing immediately became alert and turned to look at the door. Ji Chongkong stepped into the room and asked with a serious expression, "Tianqing, do you also suspect that there is a traitor in our Ji clan?" Ji Tianqing gave Huaner a look, indicating that she should leave first. After bowing to the two, Huaner obediently left the room and closed the door. Ji Tianqing looked at Ji Chongkong and calmly said, "Father, did you hear what Huaner and I said just now?" His father was an expert at the 6th stage of the Tongxian realm. He could clearly hear everything within 100 feet. Sure enough, Ji Chongkong nodded and said with a worried expression, "Tianqing, your suspicions are reasonable. Our Ji clan has never been a monolith. Especially in the face of such a great enemy. Powerful enemies are lying in wait. Someone in the Ji mansion wants to take your life. This is something that I have long expected." After a pause, he solemnly exhorted, "From now on, you should stay at home and recuperate. You must not leave the Ji mansion as you wish. If you have to go out, you must bring a guard with you." Ji Tianqing nodded and thought of the Gu clan's matter. He asked, "Father, how is the Gu clan's matter?" The corner of Ji Chongkong's mouth curled into a cold smile. He said in a deep voice, "How could the Gu clan fall out with our Ji clan over a hedonistic young master? Even if the Gu clan had several guts, they wouldn't dare. You don't have to worry. Just focus on recuperating. I have already suppressed this matter. It is nothing more than giving the Gu clan an explanation and compensating them with some money." Although his father spoke lightly, Ji Tianqing could see the exhaustion and anxiety in his father's eyes. It was obvious that this matter was not easily resolved. Yet, his father pretended to be calm and still wanted to comfort him. This caused his heart to clench. He felt even more ashamed of his father. His desire to become stronger became more and more urgent. Ji Chongkong sat down beside him and said in a low voice, "As for the matter of the traitor in the Ji clan, it is best not to make a big deal out of it for now. Otherwise, it will damage the Ji clan's foundation. However, I will not sit by and do nothing. After 2 days, I will give them a good beating and make them obediently put away their tails." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "I understand. For now, we must focus on the big picture." Ji Chongkong let out a long sigh. His tone was somewhat sorrowful as he said, "Currently, the Ji clan is in a precarious situation with internal and external troubles. Recently, I have been suffering from internal injuries. I am afraid that I do not have much time left. I am most worried about you. If I am no longer in this world one day, even if I hand over the Ji clan to you, with your current situation, how will you be able to shoulder it? When that time comes, not only will the Ji clan break apart internally, who knows how many vicious wolves will pounce on the Ji clan from the outside. How will you deal with them? I am afraid that you will soon be murdered by those vicious wolves who eat people without spitting out their bones. Tianqing, for the future, what are your thoughts and plans?" Ji Tianqing's heart was heavy. He felt as if his father was making arrangements for his death. He hurriedly consoled, "Father, I have failed to live up to your expectations and made you worry. You are a mystic enlightening realm expert. As long as you focus on recuperating from your injuries, you will definitely live a long life. As for myself, I already have a plan in mind. There is still about a month before the Sky Pillar Sect's entrance competition. I will think of a way to recover my strength within a month. When the time comes, not only will I win the top 10 in the competition and enter the Sky Pillar Sect, but I will also wash away the humiliation the Ling clan brought me and take revenge on that bitch Ling Yunfei." Entering the Sky Pillar Sect had always been Ji Tianqing's dream. Especially today, after seeing Yun Yao and the 2 Sky Pillar Sect disciples in the southern suburbs, this thought in his heart became even more firm. He was originally a martial arts genius who was obsessed with martial arts cultivation. Of course, he yearned for the realm of experts who could fly and control the power of heaven and earth. Who didn't want to be like the disciples of the Sky Pillar Sect who had unfathomable martial arts and rode powerful spirit beasts and galloped freely in the vast world? Who didn't dream of becoming the #1 elite like Yun Yao, who was famous in the Tianjin region and worshipped by the young talents of the 10 nations? Of course, Ji Tianqing wanted to. Even in his dreams, he wanted to become a martial arts powerhouse and soar high in the sky like Yun Yao, overlooking all living beings. Chapter 15. Of course, Ji Changkong understood Ji Tianqing's dream and ambition. But when he heard Ji Tianqing's impassioned words, he could only smile bitterly. Tianqing, you didn't pass the Sky Pillar Sect's entrance test. How are you qualified to participate in next month's competition? Even if you can participate in the competition, how can you win the top 10 with your current strength and enter the Sky Pillar Sect? Ji Tianqing was silent. He lowered his head and looked at the mahogany table. His eyes flickered with an unyielding light. He was so confident because of the mysterious Kenshin's tomb in his body and the Tao of the Sword Heart that he cultivated. But this was his biggest secret. How could he tell his father? Both father and son were silent. The atmosphere in the room was a bit oppressive. Ji Changkong patted Ji Tianqing's shoulder and said in a solemn tone, Tianqing, since you've made up your mind to enter the Sky Pillar Sect, I won't stop you. After saying that, he took out a purple-black iron box from his sleeve and placed it in front of Ji Tianqing. Tianqing, this is one of our Ji family's heirlooms, the Psychic Star Disc. I'm giving it to you now. Ji Tianqing opened the iron box with a puzzled expression. He took out a dark golden disc and looked at it carefully. Father, why are you giving me the Psychic Star Disc for no reason? Ji Changkong explained, the Psychic Star Disc is a top-grade profound artifact that our Ji family painstakingly forged. It can sense the primordial spirit qi between heaven and earth, identify spirit veins with both feng shui and feng shui, and point out mountain ranges that contain ores as well as the hiding places of rare treasures. Ever since your dantian was damaged and your cultivation was crippled, I've read countless ancient books and finally found a way to save you. 60 years ago, a scarlet star flower appeared in the Taiyi mountain range. This flower is a rare heavenly treasure. It blooms once every 60 years and only blooms for 3 days each time. An expert snatched the red star flower and gave it to his son who had a damaged dantian. After his son consumed the flower, not only did his dantian recover, he even reconstructed his constitution. From then on, his cultivation progressed smoothly, and he eventually became a Tongxian realm expert. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up and he was shocked. Father, that scarlet star flower actually has such a powerful effect. Of course. Ji Changkong nodded and smiled. Tianqing, do you know who that expert is? Who? The ancestor of the Ji family, Ji Shunshao, is the grandfather of the current emperor. That young man with a damaged dantian is the father of the current emperor. Ji Tianqing was even more astonished, and his interest in the red star flower was piqued. When he was young, he had heard of the legends of the Ji family. He knew that the Ji family had a mysterious ancestor named Ji Shunshao. It was said that Ji Shunshao had reached the origin core realm 30 years ago. Since then, he had been in seclusion and had not shown himself. The imperial family of the Royal Azure Cloud Kingdom had a mysterious expert like Ji Shunshao. That was why they were able to intimidate the feudal officials and experts of the 12 prefectures. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed his father's intention and asked, Father, you gave me the psychic astrolabe so that I can go to the Taiyi mountain range to look for the scarlet star flower? Ji Changkong smiled and nodded. That's right. If you can get the scarlet star flower, your problem will be solved and your strength will be restored quickly. According to my calculations, the scarlet star flower will bloom in about 10 days. At that time, various forces will be mobilized and many experts will be looking for and snatching the scarlet star flower. With the psychic astrolabe, you have a great chance of finding the scarlet star flower before them. Ji Tianqing held the psychic astrolabe with both hands and said excitedly, I understand. Thank you, Father. Ji Changkong warned with a grave expression, Tianqing, this is an excellent opportunity for you. However, you must be careful. Your life is the most important. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood and put away the psychic astrolabe solemnly. Ji Changkong left the room after explaining a few more things. After his father left, Ji Tianqing opened the secret passage in the corner and entered the secret cultivation room. After putting away the psychic astrolabe, he began to cultivate the sword heart Tao and condensed sword qi. There are only 10 days left. Within these 10 days, I must condense 12 sword qi and form the sword embryo. Under the pitch-black curtain of the night, in an old house somewhere in the imperial city, there was a little light. In a hidden room in the house, a burly middle-aged man in a purple brocade robe was sitting. Beside the middle-aged man stood a 15 or 16-year-old youth in a green robe. He was tall and had a handsome face. But his face was very gloomy, and his eyes contained a resentment that did not match with his age. A man wearing black tights and a veil over his face was kneeling on the ground with one knee on the ground. He cupped his hands and reported, "Young Master Hao, this subordinate deserves to die. I wasn't able to kill Ji Tianqing and even lost 4 of my brothers." Ji Hao was so angry that his face was distorted. He clenched his fists and kicked the masked man to the ground. He said in a low voice, "Trash. 4 8th-layer body refinement realm martial artists, and you couldn't even kill Ji Tianqing. A 3rd-layer body refinement realm trash. What's the use of this young master raising you?" The masked man was terrified as he lay on the ground. He quickly begged for mercy and explained, "Young Master Hao, please calm down. There are other changes in this matter. I went to the mountain peak to check. The 4 dead brothers had their heads pierced by a sharp weapon. It seemed to be caused by a sword aura, and they were all killed in one strike." Ji Hao frowned. His eyes were doubtful as he muttered, "Impossible. How could a trash like Ji Tianqing kill them?" At this time, the purple-robed middle-aged man opened his mouth and said to the masked man in a dignified voice, "You leave first." The masked man immediately felt as if he had been pardoned. He bowed and thanked the middle-aged man and quickly left the room. The purple-robed middle-aged man's lips curled into a cold smile. He said in a playful tone, "However, Ji Tianqing was obviously saved by an expert. But when you went to the southern suburbs, you didn't bring any guards. Who is it that secretly saved Ji Tianqing? Could it be that Ji Chongkong secretly arranged for an expert to protect him?" Ji Hao clenched his fists in anger and said with a murderous look, "Father, it doesn't matter if I fail once. Next time I will find a real expert to deal with him." The purple-robed middle-aged man shook his head and said in a serious tone, "However, don't underestimate Ji Tianqing. He is very smart and very vigilant. Today your plan failed. He is definitely suspicious of you. It is almost impossible for you to find another opportunity to kill him. Moreover, Ji Tianqing is now a trash and is no threat to us. His biggest backer is Ji Chongkong. What we should do is to find a way to get rid of Ji Chongkong. As long as we get rid of Ji Tianqing, once we control the Ji family, Ji Tianqing will be a fish on the chopping board. Won't he be at our mercy?" Ji Hao's eyes immediately lit up. He nodded and said, "Father is right. However, Ji Chongkong is a sly old fox. How can it be easy to deal with him?" The purple-robed middle-aged man revealed an expression of confidence. He sneered and said, "Even the most cunning fox has its flaws. Father naturally has a way to deal with him." Chapter 16. 3 days passed by very quickly. In these 3 days, Ji Tianqing did not leave the cool breeze courtyard at all as he cultivated in the secret room. Although there were sword wounds on his back and thighs which affected his movements. But the injuries did not affect his cultivation, nor did it affect his absorption of heaven-earth yuan qi to condense sword qi. There were already 6 sword qi in his body, and after 3 days of bitter cultivation, he finally condensed another 6 sword qi. Now that he had successfully condensed 12 sword qi, he could attempt to condense a sword embryo. But Ji Tianqing cultivated bitterly for half a day and tried 9 times, but he was still unable to condense a sword embryo. Every time he controlled the sword qi to enter his meridians and move towards his dantian, his meridians felt like they were about to be cut apart. After all, the 12 sword qi that he condensed were incomparably sharp. How could his weak meridians withstand being cut by the sword qi? Ji Tianqing endured the pain as he clenched his teeth and persevered for half a day. His clothes were completely soaked in cold sweat. But even so, he still failed and ended up in a very sorry state. He returned to his room to change into a clean set of clothes, and then went to the martial arts hall. In the martial arts hall's main hall, he secretly used the spirit stone to test his strength. The result made him feel both surprised and excited. He had actually reached the 9th level of the body refinement realm. In a short 3 days, he had risen from the 6th level of the body refinement realm to the 9th level of the body refinement realm. How shocking was this? He was only 1 step away from returning to the true element realm. After returning to the cool breeze courtyard, Ji Tianqing sat in his room in deep thought. It seems like the 1st level of the sword heart corresponds to the 1st level of the body refinement realm. Once I condense the 12 sword qi into a sword embryo, I should be able to reach the true element realm. At that time, the sword embryo will be equivalent to my dantian. Just as he was deep in thought, Huanair knocked on the door to report to him. "Eldest young master, Young Master Hao said he has something to talk to you about and is waiting in the courtyard. Ji Tianqing's eyebrows jumped as a strange light flashed in his eyes. Ji Hao is looking for me? He frowned and thought for a while before saying to Huan Er, "Let him in." Huan Er responded, and Ji Hao walked into the room after a while. Today, he was wearing a luxurious brocade robe, and his hair was carefully combed. There was also a faint fragrance of flowers and plants on his body, making him look even more handsome and noble. Ji Tianqing sat at the table drinking tea. He sized him up and asked, "Second brother, why are you looking for me? Why are you all dressed up?" Ji Tianqing came to the table and sat down with a smile on his face. He took out a red invitation card from his wide sleeve and placed it in front of Ji Tianqing. "Big brother, I just received the little prince's invitation. The little prince is hosting a banquet at the Spirit Flame Palace tonight and is inviting the young talents of the younger generation to the banquet to exchange pointers. Big brother, let's go together tonight." Ji Tianqing knew that the little Prince Ji Hao was talking about was the current emperor's youngest brother, Prince Luo Yan Ji Ling. It was said that Prince Luo Yan's congenital dantian was damaged. Since he was a child, his progress in martial arts had been slow, and he could not store the qi of heaven and earth in his internal strength. Therefore, Ji Ling could only be a trash in the body refinement realm. But the heavens were fair. While depriving him of the right to practice martial arts, they also bestowed him with outstanding wisdom and strategy, allowing him to cultivate into a gentle and elegant gentleman. When Ji Ling inherited the position of prince, the emperor bestowed the most difficult-to-control Yan and Luo prefectures to him as his hereditary fief. That was how the name Luo Yan came to be. The two prefectures were about 2,000 miles in size, with more than 50 million citizens. They were also frequently invaded by neighboring countries. But after Ji Ling took over the Luo and Yan prefectures, he only used 2 years to completely control them and found a way to stop the neighboring countries from invading. It was easy to imagine how much strategy and methods were needed to achieve this. Other than strategy, Ji Ling's reputation in the Clear Sky Kingdom spread far and wide. He prioritized the country and was worried about the suffering of the people. He was also kind and generous, courteous to the wise and recruited talents. In short, in the eyes of the Clear Sky Kingdom citizens, the little Prince Ji Ling was an almost perfect gentleman. He was also the most respectable male god in the hearts of millions of young ladies. Every year, Ji Ling would host 3 banquets at the Spirit Flame Palace to entertain the young talents of the Clear Sky Kingdom and win over their hearts. This banquet not only gave the geniuses a chance to learn from each other, and at the same time, it could also attract talents for the Clear Sky Kingdom. That was why it was called the Dragon's Gate Banquet. The meaning of the 2 words Dragon's Gate was that the geniuses who attended this banquet would be able to leap over the Dragon's Gate and have a meteoric rise. The young martial artists of the Clear Sky Kingdom were all proud to be able to attend the Dragon's Gate Banquet. However, Ji Tianqing had only been there once 2 years ago, and he had never been there again. At that time, he already had the reputation of being the #1 genius in the imperial city. He didn't treat those young talents as his opponents and disdained to flatter and interact with them. Later on, Ji Ling sent him 2 invitations, but he didn't go. Ji Ling didn't invite him again. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing glanced at the invitation and said calmly, "Second brother, you know that I don't like the atmosphere of the Dragon's Gate Banquet. I haven't been there for the past 2 years. Moreover, Ji Ling only invited you and didn't invite me." Ji Hao was a little excited and agitated. He quickly persuaded, "Big brother, I know that you don't like the Dragon's Gate Banquet, but tonight is different. I heard that the Dragon's Gate Banquet was brought forward by a month because of the Sky Pillar Sect's instructions. Moreover, the Sky Pillar Sect's people will be there tonight." Seeing that Ji Tianqing seemed to be moved, Ji Hao struck while the iron was hot and persuaded, "Big brother, I know that you've always dreamed of joining the Sky Pillar Sect. Unfortunately, you didn't pass the entrance test. Even if your strength has declined, we can still meet the Sky Pillar Sect's people at the Dragon's Gate Banquet. Perhaps things will take a turn for the better?" Ji Tianqing remained silent. The figures of Yun Yao and the 2 Sky Pillar Sect's disciples appeared in his mind. Could it be that they came to the Clear Sky Imperial City for this matter? He secretly speculated in his heart. He only felt that there must be something else going on at the Dragon's Gate Banquet tonight. When he thought of the peerless beauty in white who rode on a spirit crane and soared in the sky, he couldn't help but nod in agreement. All right, I'll go with you tonight. Seeing that he nodded in agreement, Ji Hao instantly revealed a smile. That's right, big brother. I knew that you would definitely pull yourself together. He and Ji Tianqing agreed to depart at night time. Then, he kept the Dragon's Gate banquet invitation and left the clear wind courtyard. In a small courtyard in the Ling residence, Ling Yunfei, who was wearing a long white dress, was sitting under a tree, engrossed in an ancient book in her hands. Suddenly, a white carrier pigeon flew into the courtyard and landed on the stone table in front of her. Ling Yunfei put down the ancient book and looked at the carrier pigeon in confusion. She reached out and untied a copper tube from the carrier pigeon's leg. There was a piece of paper in the copper tube. After she opened the paper, she saw a sentence on it, but there was no signature. Ji Tianqing will be attending the Spirit Flame Palace's banquet tonight. Ling Yunfei raised her eyebrows. Her clear eyes suddenly revealed a cold sneer and murderous intent. Haha, you're walking right into my trap? How can I let you live until tomorrow? Chapter 17. When the lanterns were lit, the Ji mansion lit up with countless lanterns. Ji Tianqing changed into a black outfit and left the Ji mansion with the blood dragon sword in hand. The servants had already prepared 2 carriages and Ji Hao was already waiting at the entrance of the Ji mansion. The two boarded their respective carriages and rushed towards the Spirit Flame Palace. The Spirit Flame Palace was located in the Eastern District. It was the most luxurious palace of the young prince, Ji Ling. This palace occupied an area of nearly 2,000 mu. There were more than 10 magnificent palaces, 9 spacious courtyards, and several gardens. Other than the imperial palace, the Spirit Flame Palace was the most magnificent official residence in the imperial city. Outside the palace was the Azure Cloud River that flowed out of the imperial city. The river was about 8 zhong wide. The water was clear but not rapid. There were many colorful flower petals floating on the surface of the water. When Ji Tianqing arrived at the Spirit Flame Palace, there were already dozens of carriages parked by the roadside. He used the lanterns at the entrance of the Spirit Flame Palace to glance at the carriages. He saw the insignias on the carriages. Most of them belonged to the influential clans of the imperial city. Many young talents got off the carriages and greeted each other. They formed groups of 3 to 5 and stepped onto the Azure Cloud Bridge to enter the Spirit Flame Palace. Ji Hao got off the carriage and ignored the greetings of the other young talents. He quickly walked to Ji Tianqing's side. Big brother, let's go in. Ji Tianqing silently nodded. He took the lead and stepped onto the Azure Cloud Bridge to walk towards the entrance of the Spirit Flame Palace. There were about 100 red lanterns hanging above the entrance. They emitted a faint red light that dispelled the darkness in the surroundings. The black-armored guards at the entrance were as motionless as stone statues. They emitted a cold, murderous aura from their bodies. A middle-aged fatty who looked like a butler was expressionlessly checking the guest's invitation card. Ji Tianqing and Ji Hao came to the entrance and stood in front of the middle-aged fatty. Ji Hao quickly took out the invitation card and handed it over with a smile. The middle-aged fatty glanced at the invitation card, and his gaze fell on Ji Tianqing. He asked indifferently, "Where is your invitation card?" Ji Tianqing frowned. Just as he was about to speak, Ji Hao spoke first and explained with a smile, "Steward Wang, this is my big brother, the first young master of the Ji family. Do you still need an invitation?" Steward Wang's expression immediately became playful. He said in a mocking tone, "Hee hee, the little prince has invited great young Master Ji to a banquet several times, but great Prodigy Ji looks down on the little prince's Dragon Gate banquet. Today, Prodigy Ji has become Prodigy Ji, but he still dares to attend the Dragon's Gate banquet. What a joke!" When the young geniuses near the entrance heard Manager Wang's sarcastic words, it was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They immediately surrounded him with faces full of excitement. Ji Tianqing's expression changed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Pa!" Without saying a word, he swung his hand and fiercely slapped Manager Wang's face. Manager Wang immediately staggered from the slap. The fat all over his body trembled, and he almost fell to the ground. He held his red and swollen face and glared at Ji Tianqing. He still hadn't recovered from his shock. He had the strength of an 8th-level body refinement realm cultivator, but he didn't see how Ji Tianqing made his move. Moreover, he didn't dare to believe that Ji Tianqing, who had already been reduced to a trash and a laughingstock, would dare to slap him in front of everyone. The surrounding young geniuses were also dumbfounded. They simply couldn't believe that this was real. Manager Wang regained his senses and immediately roared in a flustered and exasperated manner. Ji Tianqing, you have guts, you actually dare to hit me? Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and said in an indifferent tone, so what? Manager Wang immediately froze. He was so angry that his entire body trembled, but he couldn't say anything. Indeed, he was the manager of the Spirit Flame Palace and the little prince's lackey. It was fine for him to bully ordinary nobles. But Ji Tianqing was the young master of the Ji family, one of the 4 great families. How could the little prince fall out with the Ji family for him? Manager Wang didn't have any more temper. He could only stare fiercely at Ji Tianqing as he cursed his 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. Ji Tianqing withdrew his gaze and expressionlessly walked into the Spirit Flame Palace. Ji Hao followed closely behind. When he passed by Manager Wang, he didn't forget to give him a look of disdain. As for the reason for his disdain, perhaps only he knew. After entering the Spirit Flame Palace, there was a wide marble path in front of them. At the end of the path was the Green Cloud Hall. This was where the Dragon's Gate banquet would be held. The Green Cloud Hall was brightly lit. The center area was empty, and there were over 100 short wooden tables placed against the walls. The red lacquered wooden tables had several plates of fruits, a jug of wine, and a few plates of snacks on them. When Ji Tianqing and Ji Hao stepped into the hall, they saw that there were already over 30 youths sitting in the hall. All of them were handsome and elegant, carrying swords and sabers. Those who were familiar with each other sat together and whispered to each other from time to time, revealing a knowing smile. There were also some lonely youths and young girls who silently knelt behind the tables. They appeared to be dull and reserved. Ji Tianqing knew that most of these youths came from the common folk. They were still unfamiliar with the Imperial City and the Spirit Flame Palace. However, the 30-plus young geniuses were all seated in a corner that was further away from the main seat. After all, their status and strength weren't enough to sit in the main seat. The main seat in the north of the hall, as well as the 2 main seats on both sides, were empty. Those were the seats of the little prince, Ji Ling, and the top geniuses. The seats at the Dragon Gate banquet weren't for just anyone. When Ji Tianqing stepped into the hall, the originally bustling hall suddenly quieted down. Everyone turned to look at the entrance, and their gazes were fixed on Ji Tianqing. In just an instant, everyone's faces changed. Some were surprised, some were stunned, some were disdainful, and some showed a gloating expression. There were even some nobles who sneered and whispered to each other. Everyone knew that there would be a good show to watch at the Dragon Gate banquet tonight. Moreover, it was a great show that was rarely seen in 100 years. The former number 1 genius of the Imperial City, the most outstanding person of the Imperial Azure Sky Kingdom, had now fallen to the 3rd level of body refinement and had his marriage contract broken off by the Ling family. He had become the laughingstock of the common people. That year, he was high-spirited and famous. He disdained to attend the little prince's Dragon Gate banquet, but tonight, he came for the first time. The youths in the hall couldn't wait to see how Ji Tianqing would lose face and be humiliated by everyone tonight. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, remained unfazed and completely ignored everyone's reaction. He expressionlessly stepped into the hall and brought Ji Hao through the crowd. They walked to a corner of the hall and casually sat down at a table. After sitting down, he hugged the blood dragon sword and closed his eyes to rest with an indifferent attitude. He turned a deaf ear to everyone's whispers and chuckles, as if he didn't care about anything. Brothers, please add this book to your bookshelf. Next time, you will be able to see the new chapters. Thank you. Chapter 18. A quarter of an hour passed quickly. During this period of time, another 40-plus young talents entered the Azure Cloud Hall one after another. At this moment, there were already more than 80 people seated in the hall. The atmosphere was lively and noisy. The few seats near the main seat were for the top 10 young talents of the younger generation, and they were still empty. Suddenly, 2 sets of footsteps came from the entrance. Many young talents turned their heads to look at the entrance. When they saw the 2 young men who walked into the hall, they were all in awe. The 2 young men were both around 18 years old and looked dignified. They were in high spirits. The young man who wore a black robe and carried a sword on his back was called Wei Lingfeng. He was the number 1 genius of the Qing province. At the age of 18, he was already at the 5th level of the true energy stage, and his wind cloud sword technique had reached perfection. At the same time, he was also one of the top 10 geniuses in the entire Azure Cloud Kingdom. He was an influential figure among the younger generation. The other young man who wore a white robe and held a white feather sword in his hand was called Jiang Baiyu. He was the #1 genius of the Serene Province. At the age of 19, he was also at the 5th level of the True Energy stage. 2 years ago, he became famous in the Azure Cloud Kingdom with his falling feather sword technique. Wei Lingfeng and Jiang Baiyu's strength was similar, and they had a good relationship. They were always together and were inseparable. In addition, they liked to wear black and white robes all day long. Therefore, they were called the Black and White Heroes by the young talents of the Azure Cloud Kingdom. After the Black and White Heroes entered the hall, their expressions were as calm and reserved as usual. They vaguely revealed a trace of aloofness and arrogance. However, when they saw Ji Tianqing in the corner, their expressions changed. Both of them were stunned for a moment. Their lips curled into a playful sneer. After sizing up Ji Tianqing, they walked to the seat of honor. Just as the crowd was discussing the Black and White Heroes in low voices, another figure appeared at the entrance. It was a young man who was around 20 years old and wore a black robe. This person had an ordinary appearance. His eyes were small like mung beans, and there was a finger-long scar on his right cheek. He looked rather ferocious and fierce. However, no one in the hall dared to look down on him. Instead, they all revealed a look of awe. That was because he was Jian Wuxing, a cold, arrogant, and heartless sword maniac. Most importantly, this person was at the 6th level of the True Energy realm and cultivated the lifeless sword technique to kill. In the past, he had always been suppressed by Ji Tianqing, so among the younger generation of martial artists, he could only be ranked 2nd. However, things were different now. After Ji Tianqing had been reduced to a cripple, everyone wanted to see whether Jian Wuxing would be able to suppress everyone tonight and obtain the title of the #1 genius. Jian Wuxing walked through the crowd expressionlessly. She ignored everyone and walked to the seat of honor on the right side. Not long after, there was another commotion at the gate. Everyone turned their heads to look and saw a beautiful young lady in a white dress walking over gracefully. When they saw this 16 or 17-year-old girl in a white dress, many of the young men revealed looks of adoration and eagerness. Everyone was attracted to the girl in the white dress, and they began to quietly discuss her. Ling Yunfei. Miss Ling is here. Wow! Miss Ling is still as beautiful as ever. Miss Ling is not only a martial arts genius, but also a medical genius. She is also so beautiful. She is simply the most perfect woman in the world. Ha ha ha, Miss Ling is here. She must not have expected Ji Tianqing to be here, right? There will be a good show to watch later. Ling Yunfei walked through the crowd in the hall. Along the way, people kept greeting her. She returned the greetings in a reserved and courteous manner. Then she sat on the seat of honor on the left side. From the moment she entered the hall to the moment she sat down, she did not look at the corner at all. It seemed that she did not notice Ji Tianqing at all. The seats in the hall were finally full. All the young talents who had been invited had arrived. At this time, a handsome, thin, and handsome young man in a brocade robe walked down from the 2nd floor. His face was handsome and fair, and his words and actions were quite noble. However, his temperament was slightly feminine. When he walked into the hall and stood on the seat of honor, everyone in the hall stood up and saluted him. Greetings, young master. Greetings, King Luo Yan. Clearly, this handsome young man in a brocade robe was the owner of the Spirit Fire Palace and the host of the Dragon's Gate banquet. King Luo Yan. Ji Ling raised his hand to indicate that everyone was at ease. His gentle gaze swept across the hall. When he saw Ji Tianqing in the corner, his face froze and his pupils constricted. However, he quickly regained his composure and smiled at the crowd. You are all the pillars of our country, the hope of the future. It is this king's honor to have all of you here at the banquet. Tonight's banquet will be the same as usual. I have gathered everyone here so that everyone can learn from each other and improve together. Ji Ling smiled and said some polite words to allow everyone to learn from each other freely. Then he bid farewell and left. He went straight to the 2nd floor. After turning around a row of screens, he entered a luxurious and elegant room. Seeing that the little prince had left, the people in the main hall visibly relaxed and became lively. Everyone gathered in 2s and 3s to chat and laugh. However, most of them were complimenting each other. Very few people were discussing martial arts. Moreover, when everyone was talking, they would intentionally or unintentionally glance at the corner to see Ji Tianqing's reaction. Ji Tianqing was still the same as before. He was sitting behind a short table with his eyes closed. He came to the banquet tonight only to see the people from the sky-bearing sect. Other than that, he was not interested in anyone else. However, just because he was not interested in others, it did not mean that others were not interested in him. A tall and sturdy young man wearing an animal skin vest and shorts suddenly stood up. The corners of his mouth curled into a malicious sneer as he walked straight towards Ji Tian. He stood in front of Ji Tianqing and looked down at Ji Tianqing. He said in a mocking tone, "Ji Tianqing, I heard that you became a trash in the third layer of body refinement in one night. You even had your engagement annulled by the Ling family. Is this true?" The tall and sturdy young man's voice was very loud. He purposely raised his voice so that everyone in the hall could hear him. Suddenly, the hall quieted down. Everyone's eyes gathered on Ji Tianqing. Everyone knew that the show was about to begin. Ji Tianqing slowly opened his eyes. He expressionlessly looked at the tall and sturdy young man and calmly said, "Yes." No one would have thought that Ji Tianqing would be able to remain calm in the face of the tall and sturdy young man's deliberate humiliation. He even answered truthfully. The tall and sturdy young man was also stunned for a moment before he reacted. He grinned and revealed a mouthful of yellow teeth. "Hee, since you're a trash in the third layer of body refinement, what qualifications do you have to participate in the Dragon's Gate banquet? Tonight's banquet is attended by talented youths. Everyone has received the young master's invitation. Where's your invitation?" Ji Tianqing indifferently said, "I don't have an invitation." The tall and sturdy young man suddenly revealed an expression of, as expected, and laughed contemptuously. "Huh? Did everyone hear that? He doesn't have an invitation. Ji Tianqing, please scram out of the Green Cloud Hall right now. This is a place for young geniuses to interact. You don't have the qualifications to sit here." Ji Tianqing remained expressionless. He only raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Young geniuses? You? What? You think I'm not qualified?" The tall and sturdy young man clenched his fists and revealed a sinister cold smile. "Although I, Wu Zhang, am only in the 8th layer of body refinement. Compared to the young geniuses here, I'm far from enough to teach a trash like you a lesson. Ji Tianqing, now you only have 2 choices. Either you scram or I throw you out." Chapter 19. Wu Zhang, 19 years old this year, was at the 8th level of the body refinement realm. He was the second young master of the imperial city's Wu family. Ji Tianqing had heard of this person before and had met him a few times on certain occasions. But the Wu family was only a second-rate family in the imperial city, and Wu Zhang's talent was average. There was nothing good about him. In the past, this person could not enter Ji Tianqing's eyes and was ignored by him. But tonight, Wu Zhang had humiliated him in front of everyone at the Dragon Gate banquet. Ji Tianqing stood up and expressionlessly walked to the center of the hall. He turned around and looked at Wu Zhang. He did not say anything, but everyone knew that he had accepted the challenge. The empty space in the center of the hall was originally reserved for young geniuses to spar. Nearly 100 young geniuses immediately revealed excited smiles. They looked at Ji Tianqing with schadenfreude and laughed as they discussed. Everyone was waiting for him to make a fool of himself. They wanted to see him beaten down by Wu Zhang and then thrown out of the Green Cloud Hall. That scene would definitely be exciting. Ji Tianqing did not join in the discussion, but he also did not have any intention of standing up for Ji Tianqing. He only lowered his head and drank silently. No one saw that the corner of his mouth had curled up. Under the jeering of the crowd, Wu Zhang charged at Ji Tianqing with a cold smile. "Trash, lie down for me." When he was 5 steps away from Ji Tianqing, he suddenly roared and raised his fists to smash at Ji Tianqing's head. Wu Zhang was originally tall and sturdy, and this attack contained all his strength. His fists contained a powerful force that broke through the air. He had absolute confidence that he could knock down Ji Tianqing in one move. However, Ji Tianqing remained unmoved. He looked at him expressionlessly, without the slightest trace of fear or seriousness. Only when Wu Zhang's fists were 3 inches away from Ji Tianqing did Ji Tianqing counterattack with lightning speed. His hands were still holding the blood dragon sword. He took half a step back and dodged Wu Zhang's fists. Just as Wu Zhang brushed past him, he suddenly lifted his right leg and ruthlessly kicked Wu Zhang's waist. Boom! With a muffled thud, Wu Zhang was sent flying by Ji Tianqing's kick, drawing an arc in the air before landing heavily on the ground 20 feet away. Wu Zhang was like a heavy bull. With a bang, he fell to the ground and rolled several times before coming to a stop. Blood foamed out of his mouth. His eyes were red with anger, and he roared angrily. "No, this is impossible. Ji Tianxing, you piece of trash. How can you possibly be a match for me?" However, when Wu Zhang struggled to get up, he felt a piercing pain in his waist. He couldn't even take a step or stand steadily. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that he had suffered a heavy blow from Ji Tianxing's kick. The bones in his waist had already been broken. Everyone revealed an indescribably shocked expression. The laughter and discussion disappeared as they stared at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. Ji Tianxing hugged his treasure sword and expressionlessly walked in front of Wu Zhang. He indifferently said, Do you have the qualifications to sit here?" The words that Wu Zhang had humiliated him in front of everyone were now returned to him. Wu Zhang was so angry that he spat out blood. His entire face was twisted. Humiliation. Enormous humiliation. Was there anything more ironic and humiliating than this in this world? Wu Zhang was so ashamed that he couldn't say a single word. His eyes rolled back and he fell to the ground, unconscious. Very quickly, guards rushed in and carried the unconscious Wu Zhang away. Ji Tianxing returned to his seat and sat down. The hall fell into silence. Everyone secretly looked at him with eyes filled with shock. They obviously couldn't accept this fact. How could a trash at the 3rd level of the body refinement realm seriously injure Wu Zhang, who was at the 8th level of the body refinement realm with just one kick? Many people suddenly understood that Ji Tianxing's strength had already recovered a bit. He was no longer a trash at the 3rd level of the body refinement realm. It was very possible that he had recovered to the 8th level of the body refinement realm. When they thought up to here, those body refinement realm young men that originally wanted to provoke and humiliate Ji Tianxing immediately gave up and became listless. Ling Yunfei's face was a little cold. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. She secretly thought, damn it, how could he recover so quickly? In just a few days, he returned to the 8th level of the body refinement realm? I definitely can't let him live peacefully. I definitely can't let him recover his strength to take revenge. Luckily, I've already made arrangements. Humph. Among the young talents in the hall, there were over 30 people who had reached the true element realm. Even if they had seen Ji Tianxing defeat Wu Zhang with one move, they still wouldn't put it in their hearts. The top 10 geniuses still didn't spare a glance for Ji Tianxing. The ordinary true element realm youths were still full of confidence. Their expressions were full of ridicule as they discussed. Hee, I really didn't think that Ji Tianxing would recover to the 8th level of the body refinement realm so quickly. He used to have the strength of the 7th level of the true element realm. His battle experience is much stronger than Wu Zhang's. Even if he only has the strength of the 7th level of the body refinement realm, he can still completely defeat Wu Zhang. Humph, so what if he recovered to the 8th level of the body refinement realm? He's just a trash in the body refinement realm. Even a 1st-level true element realm cultivator can casually defeat him. Yeah, recovering to the 8th or 9th level of the body refinement realm is easy. But if he wants to quickly return to the true element realm, that is absolutely impossible. Brotherly, aren't you at the 1st level of the true element realm? Why don't you go fight with Ji Tianxing and see what level he has recovered to? I have no grievances with Ji Tianxing. Why would I go and humiliate him? You guys can just relax and watch the show. There will definitely be people who will make a move. Just as everyone was discussing, Ling Yunfei secretly turned her head and gave a meaningful glance to a dark-skinned youth behind her. The tall and skinny dark-skinned youth immediately understood and immediately stood up. He held a black iron treasure sword and walked towards Ji Tianxing with a gloomy face. When everyone saw the dark-skinned youth, they all revealed playful smiles and their eyes were filled with anticipation. Look, Hua Yunfei is about to make a move. Although Hua Yunfei is only at the 2nd level of the true element realm, defeating Ji Tianxing will be easy. I dare to bet that Hua Yunfei can beat Ji Tianxing to the ground in 3 moves. 3 moves? Aren't you overestimating Ji Tianxing a little too much? I think 1 move is enough. Hua Yunfei walked to the center of the hall and looked disdainfully at Ji Tianxing, who was in the corner. He said in a cold voice, Ji Tianxing, do you dare to fight with me? Ji Tianxing raised his eyes slightly and glanced at him expressionlessly. He then looked at Ling Yunfei, who was sitting on the left side of the seat of honor. When he looked at Ling Yunfei with his cold eyes, Ling Yunfei was also looking at him with a mocking sneer on her face. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was silent, Hua Yunfei bellowed, "Ji Tianqing, if you don't dare to accept the challenge, then kneel down obediently and beg for mercy. Perhaps I will let you go." A cold light flashed in Ji Tianqing's eyes. He immediately stood up and walked towards Hua Yunfei. "Brothers, please add it to your collection and recommend it." Chapter 20. Facing Hua Yunfei's provocation, Ji Tianqing actually accepted the challenge. Everyone in the hall was shocked and astonished. They stared at the two of them, waiting to see Ji Tianqing being trampled by Hua Yunfei. Ji Tianqing walked to the center of the hall and stood 10 steps away from Hua Yunfei. His right hand tightly gripped the unsheathed blood dragon sword. Hua Yunfei also pulled out his black iron sword. His body emitted a cold, murderous aura. With a low roar, he stabbed his sword at Ji Tianqing. "Ji Tianqing, watch this." The black iron sword emitted a sharp sword aura. With a sharp sound, it pierced through the air and arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to counterattack with his sword. Holding the crimson blood dragon sword, he began to fight with Hua Yunfei in close combat. He did not use the 12 sword auras in his body. He only used his strength at the 9th layer of body refinement to display his most proficient 10 mysterious sword art. The two swords collided, and suddenly there was a ding-ding-dang-dang sound that echoed throughout the hall. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing and Hua Yunfei had exchanged 3 moves. The two of them moved with exquisite footwork, their figures flashing and shifting in the hall, like a falcon swooping down like a rabbit. The two swords flew up and down like dragons coming out of the sea. They were like white cranes spreading their wings, constantly releasing a dazzling cold light. Many of the young geniuses in the hall were dumbfounded. Their faces revealed complex and strange expressions. No one would have thought that Ji Tianqing would be able to tie with Hua Yunfei at the 2nd layer of the true element realm. It was hard to determine the victor. Some people began to whisper in low voices. 3 moves have passed. Why hasn't Ji Tianqing been defeated yet? Impossible. Even if he has the strength of the 9th layer of body refinement, it is impossible for him to tie with Hua Yunfei. Could it be that Ji Tianqing's strength has returned to the true element realm? Most people did not understand, and their hearts were filled with doubt and shock. However, the geniuses ranked in the top 10 realized what was going on. Their expressions relaxed a lot as smiles appeared on their faces. The black and white heroes looked at the battle between Ji Tianqing and Hua Yunfei with arrogant expressions and commented on it with arrogance. Ji Tianqing is not cultivating true essence. He has not recovered to the true element boundary. At most he is at the 9th body refinement layer. The reason why he was able to tie with Hua Yunfei was because Hua Yunfei had yet to use his full strength. The young geniuses came to a sudden realization after hearing the explanation of the black and white heroes. As expected, Hua Yunfei was unable to gain the upper hand after a few moves. He was instantly enraged and unleashed his full strength. His face was as gloomy as ice, and his entire body was emitting a terrifying chill. A dark blue true essence light was surging in his palm, and the blade of the black iron sword was also covered with a layer of blue light. He pushed his true essence to the limit, causing the power of his sword technique to become even more berserk and his speed to double. Dang, dang, dang. After the black iron sword and the blood dragon sword clashed 3 times, Ji Tianqing was knocked back and staggered back several steps. Seeing this scene, the young geniuses in the hall all cheered and applauded for Hua Yunfei. Hua Yunfei seemed to have received a great boost of morale. His expression became even more ferocious and his aura became even more terrifying. He did not give Ji Tianqing any time to catch his breath. He immediately charged forward and wildly attacked with his sword. Ji Tianqing was suddenly covered in dark blue sword shadows. Each sword shadow was aimed at his forehead, throat, chest, and other vital points. His situation was very dangerous. If he was not careful, his blood would be spilled. But he was still calm and unhurried. He calmly waved the blood dragon sword and blocked Hua Yunfei's fierce attacks. Relying on the incomparably exquisite 10 profound sword art, he blocked Hua Yunfei's killing moves again and again. However, Hua Yunfei's true essence became more and more berserk, and his attacks became more and more ferocious. Ji Tianqing could not withstand Hua Yunfei's fierce attacks with just his physical strength and the 10 profound sword art. He could only continuously retreat and dodge. The 12 streaks of sword chi in his body began to stir, and were ready to be unleashed. But he resisted the thought of using the sword qi and stubbornly held on. He did not want to expose his true strength and his greatest secret in front of everyone and Ling Yunfei. But the people in the hall became more and more excited. They cheered with high spirits. Every time Hua Yunfei's sword was about to hit Ji Tianqing's vital points, everyone would exclaim and show an expectant expression. Hua Yunfei became more and more furious. He felt ashamed and angry that he could not defeat Ji Tianqing. Finally, his patience ran out, and he unleashed his ultimate sword technique without a care in the world. Ji Tianqing died. With a murderous roar, he instantly stabbed 9 streaks of sword shadows toward Ji Tianqing, covering all the vital points on Ji Tianqing's body. Ji Tianqing did not dare to take this sword technique head-on, nor could he fight Hua Yunfei head-on. He could only retreat and dodge. However, he was too slow and was stabbed in his left calf by one of the streaks of sword shadows. A wound immediately appeared on his left calf. Blood gushed out and dripped onto the marble floor. Under the light, it glowed with a dark red color. It was a ghastly sight. Ji Tianqing's body stiffened, and his retreating speed slowed down. Hua Yunfei was overjoyed. He immediately chased after him and stabbed out 9 streaks of sword shadows. Go to hell! This time, the 9 streaks of sword shadows surrounded Ji Tianqing's vital points, making it impossible for him to dodge. He was about to be stabbed by the sword light and die under Hua Yunfei's sword. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a cold, murderous intent. He made a decision without hesitation. He was going to use the sword qi in his body. Not only did he have to block Hua Yunfei's ultimate attack, but he also had to kill him. Even if he had to expose his strength and trump card in front of everyone, he could not care less. However, just as he was about to activate his sword qi, a dazzling golden sword qi suddenly flew down from the 2nd floor of the hall and arrived in front of Hua Yunfei in an instant. It was a huge sword light that was more than 2 meters long and as wide as a palm. It contained a terrifying power and instantly destroyed Hua Yunfei's 9 streaks of sword shadows. Bang! With a muffled sound, the 9 streaks of sword shadows collapsed at the same time and dissipated immediately. The huge sword light stabbed into the ground and left a huge crack in the marble floor before disappearing. Hua Yunfei was also sent flying by the terrifying power. He spat out blood and fell 30 feet away. This sudden scene left everyone dumbstruck. They were completely dumbfounded. Even Ji Tianqing did not expect that an expert would save him at this critical moment. He subconsciously raised his head and looked at the 2nd floor of the main hall. His gaze landed on a room that was blocked by a screen. At the same time, a clear and melodious female voice came from the room. It's just a friendly exchange of pointers. Why do you have to kill me? Hearing this familiar and pleasant voice, Ji Tianqing's body trembled and a smile flashed across his eyes. He knew that she had made a move. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.